Temples. What do we know about them? Who built them and what is the purpose of these structures? Are they places of worship or energy accumulators? What do temples dedicated to the one God have in common? Why is Islam's famous shrine, the Kaaba, shaped like a cube? And why is the pearl of the Orthodoxy, Saint Sophia Cathedral of Kiev, shaped like a pyramid? What do cubic and pyramidal shapes have in common? The physics of space and shapes. How does it relate to the accumulation of energy? Circles of power. What do we know about them? The Templars' temples. What is their peculiarity? What is the connection between rock-cut temples and a human energy structure? True temples. What are they like? Why did Christ call the human body a temple for the soul? January 13, 2023, live broadcast, Kaleidoscope of Facts, the mystery of sacred structures, initiated by participants of ALLATRA International Public Movement from Moldova and Romania. It's time to bring the truth back to people.
Добрый день, дорогие друзья! Мы рады приветствовать вас на 30-м выпуске «Калейдоскопа фактов. Тайна сакральных сооружений». Этот выпуск «Калейдоскопа» будет состоять из двух частей, и 13 февраля вы сможете увидеть продолжение, в котором мы расскажем о тайне кристаллов и звука, о влиянии знаков и символов, и, конечно, мы расскажем об истинных храмах и их важности в жизни общества.
Добрый день! Да, Елена, сегодня нас ждет очень много интересного. Например, какие сокровища были найдены под храмами тамплиеров, почему образ мирового яйца встречается во всех космогонических мифах и как это связано с физикой энергии. А еще мы узнаем, что такое фантомная тягучесть и какие перспективы она открывает для современной науки.
Калейдоскоп фактов — это научно-исследовательский проект. Готовясь к этому выпуску, мы собрали известные на сегодняшний день факты, взяли интервью у исследователей, ученых, для того, чтобы лучше понять, какие процессы происходят на невидимом энергетическом уровне, как работает физика форм и какое влияние все это оказывает непосредственно на нас с вами. При подготовке калейдоскопа фактов мы опирались на информацию из передач с участием Игоря Михайловича Данилова и книг Анастасии Новых. Сегодняшний прямой эфир транслируется на сотнях стриминговых платформ и синхронно переводится на 17 языков.
На протяжении всего существования человечества люди возводили сакральные сооружения, которые играли важную роль в жизни общества. К сожалению, знания об истинном предназначении этих сооружений были утрачены. Сегодня мы, опираясь на факты и научные исследования, постараемся понять, для чего они были нужны. Первый блок начнем с истории. Мы не первая цивилизация, которая живет на этой земле и строит храмы. Катарина, расскажи, пожалуйста, об этом поподробнее.
Dobrý deň. Áno, Oleg, máš pravdu. Ľudské civilizácie sa formovali, rozvíjali, dosahovali svoj vrchol a potom dochádzalo k ich úpadku a zabudlo sa na ne. Ide o určitý cyklus, o ktorom vám porozprávame o niečo neskôr. Napríklad dnes existuje množstvo dôkazov o existencii silnej a vysoko rozvinutej civilizácie v dávnej minulosti, ktorá úrovňou rozvoja prekonala technológiu súčasného ľudstva. O tom hovoria početné štúdie vedcov a artefakty zhromaždené počas mnohých expedícií. Výskumníci ako Graham Hancock, Robert Milton Schock, Andrej Sklarov, Alexander Viktorovič Koltypin vo svojich prácach poskytujú dôkazy o technickom pokroku a vedeckých poznatkoch predchádzajúcej civilizácie. Ak sa pozrieme na dejiny ľudstva v rozsahu niekoľkých desiatok tisíc rokov, môžeme uvidieť zaujímavú zákonitosť, ktorá sa prejavuje v cyklickosti rozvoja dôležitých a významných udalostí. Obzvlášť názorné sú tieto etapy
particularly illustratively in Hinduism. Yuga, in Hindu cosmology, refers to eras that replace one another cyclically in the following sequence and represent the wheel of time. The first stage is Satya Yuga or Krita Yuga, the golden age of truth and purity. Then follows Treta Yuga or the silver age. The third epoch is Dvapara Yuga or the bronze age. And the concluding epoch is Kali Yuga, or the Iron Age, in which we live right now. These four yugas constitute the cycle of civilization development of 12,000 years. For example, each yuga lasts about 3,000 years. In each subsequent yuga within the cycle, the understanding of truth, purity, and morality decreases. The humankind has passed through such cycles more than once. The modern humankind lives at the era of Kali Yuga. What do the legends and calendars of different peoples of the world say about it? Let's find out from the following video.
Kali Yuga. According to the Vedas, every 12,000 years of its existence, the Earth successfully passes through the cycles of 4 ages or epochs, surpassing one another like the seasons. The 4 ages of time are Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. We are now living at the end of the Kali Yuga, the end of the 12,000-year cycle. It is extremely difficult to find this date in ancient Sanskrit texts because information about cyclicity presented in them contains many inaccuracies, as pointed out by Sri Yotkaswar. In many Sanskrit texts, the 12,000-year duration of the Yuga cycle was artificially inflated to an abnormally high value of 4,320,000 years by introducing a multiplication factor of 360, which was represented as the number of human years, which constitutes a divine year. However, certain texts, such as the Mahabharata and the Laws of Manu, still retain the original value of the Yuga cycle as 12,000 years. Many other ancient cultures, the Chaldeans, Zoroastrians, and Greeks, also believed in a 12,000-year cycle of the ages. The complete Yuga cycle of 24,000 years was comprised of an ascending and descending Yuga cycle, which followed each other for eternity, like the cycles of day and night. For the past 2,700 years, we have been evolving through the ascending Kali Yuga, and this Yuga is coming to an end in 2025. Point to the same date. It is well known that in ancient times, each civilization had its own calendar, its own chronology, which took its beginning from some real events, a flood, an earthquake, or the end of a migration of people. In the ancient history of mankind, there is indeed an amazing coincidence of the initial points of reference of various chronologies. The ancient Egyptian calendar, Sothic cycle, had 1,460 years. One of these cycles ended in 1322 BC, or 1322 BC. If you count 7 cycles back, you get 11,542 BC. The ancient Assyrian calendar consisted of lunar cycles of 1,805 years. The end of one of these cycles occurred in 712 BC. If you count 6 cycles back, you will again get to 11,542 BC. The ancient Indian lunar solar cycle consisted of 2,850 years. Iron Age, Kali Yuga, in which we now live, began in 3,102 BC. Counting 3 cycles back from this date, we will get 11,652 BC. For the ancient Maya, Central America, the beginning of the calendar era is the year 3,373 BC, and the calendar cycle is 2,760 years. Counting 3 cycles back, we get to 11,653 BC.
Ako vidíme,
As we can see, the information that has passed to our times points to one and the same date. We're living at the end of the cycle. The transition period between cycles is always associated with serious cataclysms, which, as archaeological evidence and geological data show, occur regularly on our planet at a period of 12,000 years. It is almost impossible to explain this similarity of the calendars of different peoples, separated by oceans and deserts, in a single date by a chance. The starting point for all the calendars was a global event, and that event was a global geological catastrophe. It occurred 12,000 years ago and caused the sinking of a large island or archipelago in the North Atlantic, Atlantis. The facts about the existence of Atlantis and its demise have been preserved in numerous written sources, myths, and legends. You can learn more about this in the film Atlantis, Elite in Search of Immortality and the Kaleidoscope of Facts. They all show that these events took place 12,000 years ago. And once again, we're witnessing a cycle that is coming to its end. It is at this time that we live now, and we're already observing how the planet shudders from cataclysms that have not been seen before by the current civilization. Now we cannot influence the cosmic processes that cause this, but we need to know the truth, and based on it, make a decision that will affect the further destiny of the civilization that currently lives on the planet. 12,000 years is just a cycle. Let us rewind time into the past and unfold the whole chain of events that took place on the planet after the flood, during which Atlantis ceased to exist. In the Egyptian mythology, there remained legends about the Golden Age, the time of spiritual rebirth of mankind, Zeb Tepi. Zeb Tepi is an ancient Egyptian concept meaning the first time or the first moment. Zeb, time, Tepi, first. The beginning of cosmic existence. We will talk about that time today, but I would like to point out right away that at that time, people who were developing spiritually, striving for inner transformation and perfection, were living on earth, while those who did not share these values and continued to live with very different views of neglect and consumerism went to live underground. To this day, there is plenty of evidence of underground cities and temple complexes. We will now give just a few examples.
All over the world, ancient underground cities have been found in which tens of thousands of people could live simultaneously. Here are just a few examples of them. Derinkuyu is an underground city in Turkey. 12 floors go deep into the earth. All the halls and tunnels have excellent ventilation. Researchers believe that only a small part of the area has been discovered. There are hypotheses of 20 floors not yet discovered. Ancient caves on the territory of China, Longyu. Their total area is over 30,000 square meters. What technology was used to excavate these caves and perform architectural measuring is unknown. Located on the territory of China are also huge mysterious caves, Huashan. It features a multitude of stone columns and unique structures of the work material. This is just a fraction of the mysteries of the underground world. What civilizations lived underground and how was all of this built? For more information, watch the Kaleidoscope of Facts series on ALLATRA TV.
Okrem príkladov, ktoré sme videli,
Apart from the examples we have just seen, there are others. Many researchers agree that underground tunnels run under oceans and connect continents. There is a huge labyrinth of tunnels underground in Cusco, Peru. Many Jesuit priests wrote about it. The Peruvian writer and historian Garcilaso de la Vega made a note that describes them in more detail. The labyrinth consisted of the most real underground streets, as well as caves.
Že ani tí najodvážnejší dobrodruhovia sa doň neodvážia vstúpiť bez zvitku lana, ktorého koniec je priviazaný k hlavnému vchodu.
With exactly the same entrances, the system is so complicated that even the bravest adventurers do not dare enter it without a coil of rope, the end of which is tied to the main entrance. In Peru, not far from the Nazca Desert, famous for its colossal drawings, there are caves believed to be inhabited by underground spirits. The speleologists made their way through the tangled passages until they finally reached a huge hole, which probably once served as a place of religious ceremonies. In the center were 98 stone pedestals, similar to the altars of the Maya. Each pedestal had a trough caved into it for the drainage of blood. Some of the tunnels were filled with human remains. The longest tunnel reached into the ocean and went underwater. There is a very interesting testimony about the caves in the 16th century by the Spanish chronicler Cristobal de Molina. He tells of a legend popular among the indigenous Indian population about the Almighty Father of mankind, who, having completed the act of creation of all things on earth, departed to his subterranean world. Similar myths about subterranean gods are in China and among the peoples of Siberia. The Kandana Caves, located in India, is a monumental structure that can hardly be called a cave. It is an architectural masterpiece, impossible to create by hand and with a primitive tool. Most likely, the civilization that created them had a high level of knowledge and technology. More information about underground cities was revealed in the Kaleidoscope of Facts, The Code of Gods, and in the first 2 episodes of this research film series. A new and pivotal moment in the history of human society occurred at the turn of 6,000 years after the menace of Atlantis. During this period, the consumer format began to manifest itself over large areas. A prime example of this is the Sumerian civilization. It was during this time period that priorities in society shifted, and as a consequence, displacement occurred. The descendants of Atlanteans who lived underground came out, while those who continued to adhere to spiritual development and the creative way of society were forced either to move to other territories or to go underground, often occupying the same caves in which the descendants of Atlanteans had previously lived. One striking example of such mixing is the underground temples of Malta. A total of 23 megalithic sanctuaries have been discovered there. It is believed that the world's oldest underground temple, or Hypogeum Safleni, began to be built before 4000 BC. Time had passed and the road to the temple was lost, and the megalithic underground sanctuary itself was forgotten and abandoned until 1902, when local builders laying urban drains came across an enfilade of 34 mysterious egg-shaped caves going deep into the earth, into the ground. The largest room in this dungeon was called the main chamber. It was a very unusual egg shape. We will talk about egg-shaped temples in detail today in our Kaleidoscope of Facts. Historians believe that At that time, in Malta, there was a fertility cult of Mother Earth, which explains the oval shape. They believe that this shape represents a female womb. However, it must be understood that such ideas of a female deity in the sense of fertility and fecundity are caused only by the dominance of the materialistic consumerist format of thinking in the minds of modern people. At the same time, scientists who have studied ancient cultures in detail, such as Maria Gimbutas, believe that the veneration of the divine feminine principle is related to the spiritual development of the society of the distant past, and that the power of creation hidden in the feminine principle has a sacred meaning. From the book ALLATRA, we know that the feminine principle is spiritual, in spiritual terms, is a manifestation of the creative power of Allat, which underlies the creation of the world and contributes to the spiritual transformation of human beings. The Hypogea chamber has several entrances made in the form of a trilithon. Of the 3 stones, where 2 are vertical and 1 is laid horizontally on top of them. Through the trilithons, the passageways lead either to other chambers or they are blind entrances. Acoustic research carried out by Maltese composer Ruben Zara and a team of Italian scientists has shown that the sound in the oracle chamber resonates at 110 Hz, which matches the resonance frequencies in many other ancient places of worship, particularly in Ireland's Newgrange. Scientists studying Maltese Hypogea agree that the temple was built by people who knew mathematics. The temples they built were for religious activities, rituals, and served as venues for religious services and sacrifices. Most likely the question you have now is, how can this be possible? There is a mixture of these, so we can assume that the point was in their purpose. By whom and for what purpose the cave was used. After all, we have seen that along with pompous caves and enormous size which served for burials and sacrifices, there are caves of a very different type, egg-shaped, and to those who lived in them worshipped the cult of Mother Earth. The cult of a universal mother is practically ubiquitous. Women took an active part in the spiritual life of society, and in ancient times, people especially venerated the feminine divine principle. Numerous female statuettes with carved sacred signs and ornaments have been found, which indicates that those peoples worshipped the creative feminine principle, because therein is a very powerful source of life force. I now give the floor to Natalia, who will tell us about the life of the people who stayed on Earth at the time when the descendants of Atlanteans were still underground and what values they were guided by. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katarina. I'm happy to greet everyone. As you have seen, everyone who were underground, they built huge temple complexes to gather large numbers of people. We are specifically bringing your attention to this, and later on speakers will tell us why the priests actually did that and what were the goals they pursued. At the same time, people who remained on the surface of the earth had a peaceful way of life with no stratification and no clannishness. There were no priests and no chiefs. Scientists have identified a huge number of facts of peaceful life, and most importantly, the evidence of the prevalence of spiritual knowledge and values in society, which can be seen in a lot of artifacts with characteristic signs and symbols. According to the archaeologist Maria Gimbutas, it was a long period of remarkable creativity and stability, an era free of conflicts. Their culture was a culture of art. In Çatalhöyük, archaeologist Saredrin Dural noted the absence of even of the social stratification. All houses there were about the same. There were no administrative buildings or workshop houses. As the team of archaeologists concluded, who were led by Jan Oder, women and men had equal status in society. There were no traces of war or violence anywhere. There were no special fortress walls. Almost every house contained a special room. Scientists called it a sanctuary. It was a room for spiritual practices. People tried to place this room in the center of the house. The walls of such a room, especially the eastern and the northern ones, were painted with frescoes reaching 12 to 18 meters in length. Hadjilar is dated back to 7th to 5th millennium BC, and it is located 220 kilometers to west of Çatalhöyük. As evidenced by sanctuaries with their mural paintings and statuary images, the Neolithic Anatolia was a civilization of the great goddess. Cucuteni-Tripilia culture, dating back to 6th, 5th millennium BC, is an amazing culture, where most of the symbolic images are associated with the cult of the great goddess. Archaeologist Natalia Bourdeau revealed that all the female sacred images of Cucuteni-Tripilia culture are the embodiment of certain aspects, manifestations, or properties of the personality of the Great Mother. The remains in the burials showed no signs of violent death. The houses had circular openings where there were painted ritual signs on the inside, and on the outside of the buildings themselves, circle succession of houses in the system of a town or a settlement indicate that their society was dominated by spiritual priorities. Archaeologists have noticed that the symbolism used by the people of Cucuteni-Tripilian culture, also known as Cucuteni culture in Europe, was used in Chinese culture Yangshao, dating back to 5th to 2nd millennium BC, and Anasazi culture. It is a mystery for archaeologists that these people actually expressed words with the use of artistic symbols, including those that later gains importance in the culture of ancient Egypt, ancient China, and India, which were far away from this place. These are the yin-yang symbols, swastikas, the symbol of the world tree, unusual stripped images, and which subsequently became characteristic for ancient Egyptian clothing elements. It is also interesting that mounds or pyramidal structures are present in the cultures of these countries in particular. This suggests that people of ancient times knew about the pyramidal structures and the spiritual practices associated with those structures. Moreover, they erected such pyramids in specific places according to certain stellar orientations. Such structures exist to this day. According to archaeological excavations, the same thing is true for many peoples with the worship of feminine principle, the same as in Cucuteni-Tripilian culture. We observe no wars and no inequality. In Archaim, the country of cities, in Sintasha culture, they had a peaceful way of life and didn't fight against anyone. Let's note that the earliest settlements were oval in shape. They were round, later rectangular or close to a square. The inhabitants of Archaim knew that architectural forms have a strong influence on the physical properties of space and a human being. That is why, before building their cities, people carried out complex architectural planning and design, taking into account the geographical position and particularities of the surrounding landscape. All settlements of the country of towns were located near rivers and lakes. When a river channel did not completely circle the territory, the residents built a special channel on their own to be surrounded by water all the time. Near every settlement, at a distance of not more than 1 kilometer, there had to be a mountain or a hill. It is noteworthy that many cultures built pyramidal sanctuary mounds. Originally, they were not burial sites. Those were places which contributed to the spiritual development of a human. Over time, these places and sites were turned into places of power, because people had been practicing self-improvement work there for a very long time, investing the power of their attention in their spiritual development. However, when the knowledge of spiritual transformation began to be lost, the mounds and pyramidal structures became increasingly used as tombs and burials, thus honoring and worshipping death rather than life. As we can see, ancient cultures lived in peace, in creation, where knowledge about the spiritual world and the spiritual component of a human being was available to everyone. There are many of such cultures: Harappan, Anau, Mingar, Rapa Nui, Göbekli Tepe, Sesklo, and many others. At the same time, the cultures had quite fundamental knowledge in various fields. As an example, let us take Göbekli Tepe. It is located in northern Anatolia, 50 kilometers from the Turkish-Syrian border. Graham Hancock believes it to be an open-air observatory. It dates back to 11th to 13th millennia BC. Graham Hancock believes that this is an open-air observatory, and he explicitly states that it's an enormous megalithic structure with columns that weigh more than 20 tons, perfectly aligned with the stars. The structure itself consists of 3 rings. Klaus Schmidt's team of archaeologists determined that there were no burials there. Scientists have different opinions. Some say that it's a temple, others are convinced that it's an open-air observatory. Scientists at the University of Edinburgh have reported a version of its multifunctional purposes. One thing is definitely clear: those who built it had a very profound knowledge of astronomy and geology. Even nowadays, the construction of such complex structures requires serious funding, architectural design, engineering solution, the availability of special equipment, the presence of experts from various fields, and quite a lot of time. In fact, we have listed just a small fraction of part of cultures that all have in common the absence of special temples, lack of separation, absence of chiefs or priests. Spiritual development was the main priority of society. The right to choose was established, and no one was forced to work on oneself. In other words, every person consciously chose their own path. I thank you very much for your attention and give the floor to the hosts.
As we can see, people of antiquity who worshipped the divine feminine principle and led a peaceful, creative life built pyramid-shaped sacred structures, but did not erect cultic temple complexes. There is a pattern. While there are no priests, stratification of society and conflicts, there are no huge temples. However, about 6,000 years ago, there was a transition from individual work on oneself to shifting the responsibility for personal spiritual development to rapidly developing priestly structures. This was due to the loss of spiritual knowledge and the transition from a creative society format to a consumerist format, when people wanted power, magic, and material values.
Despite the change in the format of society from creative to consumerist, the sacred places of power have not lost their importance. After all, power is a power. What is important is what people use it for. That is why, in such places, we can see layering of cult constructions in different ages. Julia will tell us about examples of such layering.
Спасибо, Олег.
Thank you, Oleg. This is quite a broad subject. There is plenty of evidence of such structures on all the continents when pyramids or temple complexes were built on more ancient foundations. For example, the ancient Egypts had such a tradition. They measured the legends of the original time, Zep Tepi. In that distant time of Osiris, 7 wise men came to Egypt. They erected sacred mounds along the Nile River, which later on served as the foundation for building pyramids and temples. With their intimate knowledge of cyclic disasters, those wise men aspired to help future generations to survive through global climate change at the end of 12,000-year cycle. As Katerina has told us, we are now at the end of this cycle. So, our ancestors created a complex that could help them survive this time. They believed that one day the beautiful epoch of the original time would return again and there would be a golden millennium, golden age of humanity. I suggest watching an excerpt from the video with Igor Mikhailovich Danilov, Keys to the Future.
We are not the first civilization on this planet. There were civilizations that almost completely vanished, while there were those that simply left our planet. This is actually not news. After all, traces of their activities, of past civilizations, are still there. And the most interesting thing is that, let's put it carefully, their traces also contain instructions on how to make sure that even the cycle wouldn't prevent us from surviving and achieving the creative society, well, and even the ideal society. After all, on those very... Let's not delve into details. Let's say on our planet, there remain too many traces of past civilizations. Yes, there are attempts to twist, to disguise it all for us and so on, but we are, let's say, free people. We are able to assess the situation sensibly, and we understand perfectly well that despite the modern technologies of our civilization that has reached such a serious development, including technical and scientific development, we are incapable of reproducing what was done back then. So, in addition to what the past civilizations left specifically for us as an indication that they existed, those structures that won't disappear anywhere, there are a lot of artifacts and a lot of indications of how to really make sure that in this cycle we manage not just to put a tight collar on the Cerberus, but to put it on a short leash. It's all there, friends. And it's true.
Thank you, Igor Mikhailovich. The Egyptians have left us a whole library of information, not fully explored by humanity, in the form of ancient iconic buildings such as the pyramids of Giza, the pyramid of Unis, or the temple of Edfu dedicated to the god Horus. Also, the temple of Amun-Ra at Al-Karnak is the central temple of the Karnak complex. The site for the complex at Karnak was not chosen accidentally. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that Karnak, at that time it was called Thebes, was the first city founded at the original mount that rose from the waters of chaos at the beginning of the world. At that time, the creator of god Atum, in some papyri, it was Ptah, was standing on this mount that began the creation of the world. The temple site, as the Egyptians believed, was the original foundation. The temple was laid here for this particular reason. During the ancient kingdom in Dendera, a cult center of Hathor was established. One of the most famous on the site and the best preserved in Upper Egypt is the Temple of Hathor. As it appears before us nowadays, it's at least the third reincarnation of the temple. Also, according to archaeologists, it is well known that there was a temple on this site even before, which was built at the time of Pharaoh Thutmose The third, in addition, an inscription in one of the walls in that era mentions the 6th dynasty pharaoh Pepi I, which indicates even the more ancient origin of this temple. At the end of 2021, archaeologists from the Polish Academy of Scientists and the University of Orient in Naples discovered that they believed to be one of the most lost Egyptian temples of the sun, and the third to be found and the first to be discovered in half a century. During excavations under the new Sarah temple, researchers came across an older structure made of adobe. This discovery indicates that there was even an older building on this site. All over the world today we can find many sacred structures that preserve centuries of histories. Let us proceed to examining a few of such examples. Lebanon. The temple complex of Baalbek is built on an older megalithic platform. Monolithic stones weighing an average of 360 tons. They are found at the base of the platform, and the three most grandiose megaliths of the Baalbek platform weigh 800 tons each, and they form the so-called famous Trinison. Cambodia. Angkor Wat is one of the largest temple complexes in the world. It is located in the floodplain of the Mekong River. All the major temples of the Angkor Wat complex also retain traces of being built above earlier structures. In the region of West Java, Indonesia, there is a megalithic site, Gunung Padang. Thanks to research by a team of scientists led by Danny Hillman in 2011, it is now known that this complex structure consists of several layers. It's a multi-layered structure that has been built over thousands of years. Machu Picchu in Peru is also considered to be an architectural and engineering masterpiece. Among all the structures, there is a part of megalithic masonry. By analyzing satellite images and data collected from the ancient city, scientists have established that Machu Picchu was built at a site where several tectonic faults intersect. Another example is the temple complex in the city of Cusco, Sacsayhuaman. According to the official version, this stone fortress is a palace built by the Incas. However, the grandeur of this structure and the precision of the stonework of masonry indicates that its builders were far superior to the Inca civilization in terms of their technology. Remarkably, the same is true for the previously mentioned Machu Picchu structure. In the kaleidoscope of facts, mystery of the ancient world, megaliths and artifacts, you can find out more about the majestic megaliths and why the ancients actually left them for us as a legacy. It is remarkable that practically all constructions of antiquity have been executed from the big and heavy stones, megaliths, weighing some tens and sometimes hundreds of tons, and there are even more heavy stone blocks. Masters of the past have left many traces of high technology equipment. The ancients knew the exact values of geometry, mathematics and physics. The fact is obvious. The places for building sacred structures were not chosen accidentally. Let us continue the excursus into history and see what is known about construction of temples in our time, when they were not simply erected on more ancient foundations, but also rebuilt on the same sites by representatives of various denominations. Often when one religion was replaced with another, structures of the formerly dominant religions were destroyed at these sites, and new ones were erected to worship other gods. Even the smallest remnants of the emblematic structures have been built earlier were deliberately distorted and destroyed. A landmark in the land of Jerusalem is the Temple of Mount Moriah, the Temple of Jerusalem. History has recorded many instances when various archaeological expeditions have conducted numerous excavations under this mysterious site, where at one time there was the Temple of Solomon, and before that the Temple of Our Lady, placed on an ancient stone foundation. These megaliths, which are situated at the foundation, are very much reminding of the megaliths of Baalbek veranda. Let's turn to the opinion of the geological and mineralogical scientist, researcher Koltipin Alexander Viktorovich.
I can tell you what the megaliths of the Temple Mount are because I've studied them twice. I've been to the Cattell Tunnel twice. I went there the second time on purpose. Although it's very difficult to get there, you have to book a tour 3 or 4 months in advance to get into the Cattell Tunnel. The second time I was there, it was hard enough to sneak away from the guide to walk around on your own. Because when you go there with a guide in a group of 20-30 people, you won't see anything. So every time I had to fall behind and walk there by myself and explore. So being there for the first time, I made a general overview of what the Cattell Tunnel is, and I also visited the archaeological park on top of it. These are the remains of the western wall, supposedly of Solomon's temple, which was thought to have been built, well, some say by Herod, but more likely by Solomon. There are even certain signboards there. The megalithic blocks in the Cattell Tunnel weigh up to 600 tons. In the archaeological park, they are smaller, something up to 100 tons or so. The blocks weighing around 50 or 30 tons are more common there, but in the Cattell Tunnel, the weight of the largest blocks reaches up to 600 tons, and as it usually happens, you can't even stick a knife blade between them. And there are signboards everywhere that, for some reason, this Cattell Tunnel was built by Herod rather than by Solomon. Which raises a question, why is it so? For it was already the beginning of our era. But such ancient blocks are covered with intense secondary alterations. How come that builders of that time, only 2000 years ago, could put more than 500-ton blocks so tightly together? Today we see that builders use small stone blocks in the construction. As for Roman paving, I've seen a lot of it. Well, roughly speaking, they are just stones put together with ordinary cement. I've seen a lot of ancient Israeli structures. I've traveled around Israel a lot. They used small stones, blocks that are either smeared with clay or cement, which was used at that time. Sometimes they were even fitted together without any cement. And then suddenly we see such a colossal structure, immediately the question arises. Naturally, they are much older, and what is attributed to Herod or even Solomon was actually built millions of years ago. The second time I went there specifically for one purpose, to see the relationship between these blocks and the host rocks. And what I saw there, the ultimate result is that the host rocks have the same degree of lithification, that is, fossilization. These are not clays and limestones. This is petrified rock, which is exactly the same age as these blocks. Moreover, I found several spots where these blocks transition into this rock, without any boundaries. In other words, this is clearly a complex of the same time. And since that rock is about 15 million years old, then it turns out that this entire ancient structure is in fact about the same Neogene age. In other words, these are Neogene structures that have survived and are preserved all over the world. This is my area of expertise. I study these structures. They are everywhere. And these survived structures of a later civilization, from the time of Solomon, from the time of Herod, the Romans used for their own purposes, not only in Israel, not only in the Temple Mount, but in other places in Israel. I've seen many such ancient megalithic cities in Italy, in Spain, which were constructed using small blocks. And sometimes it's like a layered pie, meaning different civilizations used them as some kind of fortifications. As some ancient city, they just rebuild them for their needs. So it turns out that we observe a sequence of civilizations of at least the past 15-20 million years, which used the same structures and built on top of them. The same is with the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Exactly the same is elsewhere in Israel. Almost all cities in central Italy were also built this way. Well, those ones are not millions of years old, it's different. They are younger because there are, well, it's more likely that the original structures are hundreds of thousands of years old. And in Spain, again, we see cities which must have been millions of years old as well. And then more modern constructions were built on top of them. Even if we take this Jupiter temple, we cannot say it is Roman, because, for example, the Valley of the Seven Temples on the island of Sicily, I carefully study these huge temples, ruins, columns, which are sometimes 3 meters in diameter. So these columns are tall structures. I think based on a number of attributes, and I have it all in my reports on the website, that they were built hundreds of thousands of years ago. Well, hundreds or several tens of thousands of years ago on some ancient Neogene foundation, and again it turns out to be a layered pie. Same is true of Baalbek. Most likely we see there both ruins of Neogene and ruins that were built by a civilization hundreds or many tens of thousands of years ago. And much later ancient civilizations came there. Canaanites, Phoenicians, Romans and so on. They used and expanded those structures.
Thank you very much, Alexander. If we look at the earlier period, we can trace how in the 4th century was the beginning of the period of mass construction of early Christian temples. By the way, it was exactly in the 4th century that the pilgrimage to holy places began. It was sharply popularized following the so-called pilgrimage to Jerusalem by Empress Helen, the mother of Constantine the Great. It was on Helena's orders that the pagan temple in Bethlehem, a town near Jerusalem, was demolished. In its place, they built a Christian temple, the Basilica of the Nativity. Today it is divided between 3 parishes, the Jerusalem Orthodox Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and the Armenian Apostolic Church. In the 4th century AD, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was erected on the ruins of a pagan temple in that same Jerusalem. Thank you very much for your attention. I suggest watching a video to continue this subject.
Sacred places. Why do people stop at nothing to get there? They are ready to cover great distances, often walking hundreds of kilometers. What is so special about them? What kind of secret do they keep?
While traveling around different countries, it is interesting for me to study local customs and traditions. I always go to temples. Once in Turkey, I visited Hagia Sophia, the Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque. And then something happened. It is very difficult to describe in words, but I have not experienced anything like this in all the years of my travels. The question arose before me, what's so special about this place?
Hagia Sophia Cathedral in Istanbul has a complicated history. Like most temples, the cathedral stands on a hill. It has been destroyed, burned down and rebuilt several times. A scan revealed a huge empty space underneath the cathedral. Various sources say that there are ancient cisterns for collecting water, as well as numerous tunnels under the cathedral. Today, Hagia Sophia is a significant place for 2 religions, Islam and Christianity. Before that, there was a church, which in its turn was built on the shrine of Artemis. And even before that, there was an ancient sanctuary.
It's strange why the same place was used for construction. After all, at that time, the population of the planet did not exceed 500 million, which means that there was plenty of free land. And nevertheless, in different periods, different religions built their temple on the same place. Perhaps it is a coincidence, but then why other temples are not rebuilt? Many have stood unchanged since the time they were built.
Hagia Sophia was built from special marble taken from the ruins of Solomon's temple, which was on the Mount Moriah. It is also called the Temple Mount.
It's interesting that Mount Moriah is also considered to be a place of power that attracts millions of people. So there must be something in common between Hagia Sophia and the Mount.
Jerusalem, Mount Moriah, which is also known as the Temple Mount. This place is a shrine to 3 religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Each religion has its own sacred building. They were built on the ruins of older temples. In the place of Solomon's temple, the second temple was raised by Herod. Later, the dome of the rock mosque was erected on the same place. It is the third most important Islamic shrine after Mecca and Medina. Next to this mosque, a tumble-down Christian basilica dedicated to the Virgin Mary was rebuilt and turned into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The remaining fragment of the wall of Solomon's temple has become a holy site for the Judeans and is called the Wailing Wall.
No, after all, it seems that the overlapping of the temples is not an accident. Perhaps the answer is hidden in the very place where the temples are located. But what makes this place so important? What is the source of its power? Let's keep searching.
Temple Mount is noted in many religions. Not far from it is the Church of David and the Garden of Gethsemane. These mountains was indicated to Abraham for sacrifice of his son. It was also the place where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, performed the ascension, Miraj, with the angel Jabrail, visiting the seven heavens and meeting the prophets. Much later, in 1099, on the same mountain there was the main church of the Templar order, which was located in Al-Aqsa.
There we go. So the Templars were also attracted to this place. Why did they need it when they had so many temples in France? France, Chartres, right. The history of Chartres Cathedral is the same as that of Hagia Sophia. It has also been destroyed and rebuilt several times and was also built on the site of a sanctuary.
The history of Chartres go back to prehistoric times, when the Celtic tribe of Carnauts settled on that place. It was a time when the Druids and their sacred groves played an important role in people's lives. The Druids gathered on the hilltop of the town of Autricum, where their temple was located. After the Roman conquest, the town of Autricum was renamed into Carnotum, and later Chartres. A church was built on the top of the hill at the site of the Druid temple. Today, Chartres Cathedral is located there. Under the pillars of the building, there are 14 artificial water channels. It is still a mystery how and why the water channels were laid at a depth of 37 meters, and why the central dome of the cathedral is also 37 meters above ground level.
Well, the puzzle is beginning to come together. There are many such places in different parts of the world where a layering of temples takes place.
The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was built and rebuilt many times. The site of the temple was not chosen by chance. In ancient times it was a site of a sanctuary for the Carian goddess of fertility. France, Paris. Like many ancient Christian churches, the main cathedral of the French capital, Notre-Dame de Paris, Our Lady of Paris Cathedral, was built on the site of a pagan sanctuary, which appeared there in 432. The remains of its foundations were found under the Choir Isles. Armenia, Tatev Monastery, was founded in the 9th century on the site of ancient pagan sanctuary, which was commonplace in these regions at that time. Russia. In the 19th century, there was some work carried out to dismantle the very first church in Moscow, the Church of the Nativity of John the Baptist, during which researchers came to the conclusion that this church was built exactly on the site of a pagan sanctuary. Germany, Cologne. The Basilica of St. Cunibert. The church has preserved the legend of how St. Cunibert turned a place of pagan worship into a site of Christian veneration. I am saying about a spring with healing water. For a long time there had been a pagan temple near it. The saint decided that it was unacceptable to have such an abomination next to a bishop's residence, so the sanctuary was destroyed. Georgia, Uplistsikhe. The cave town of Uplistsikhe is located on the left bank of the Kura River, about 10 kilometers from the village of Gori, and dates back to 1000 BC. Uplistsikhe was a prominent pagan center before Georgia adopted Christianity in the 4th century, and in the 9th century, a Christian brick basilica church was built right on the site of the former pagan temple of the sun.
Well, there is enough evidence to say with certainty that the layering of temples is a clearly traceable pattern. Water and voids can often be found beneath the lowest cultural layer.
Voids and water, as well as natural faults from a special geomagnetic zone of positive and negative energy. As a rule, ancient shrines were located in places with positive energy. Since ancient times, pagan sanctuaries have been regarded as sacred places, which, from the very moment of the emergence of energy on Earth, have carried the power and information provided by God. Depending on what people wanted, spiritual development or material wealth, the place saturated with either positive or negative energy respectively. And the accumulation of this or that energy had an effect on the surrounding space and on the inhabitants of the area. The space of the sanctuary could be marked out both by natural boundaries and by man-made boundaries, palisades, fences, small fireplaces, etc. Sometimes such a boundary could be simply a circle outlined by a walking stick of a priest.
It turns out that in ancient times, people did not need temples for group spiritual practices. A round-shaped space on an elevated site was enough.
Sanctuaries were of several types. Places of power were due to natural conditions, an area of positive energy was formed. And the places of power, where serious spiritual work was conducted by people on the same place for a long time. In both cases, such places were only of help to those who wanted to develop spiritually. Later, with the loss of spiritual knowledge, these places began to be marked by a hedge, trees, or some kind of fence. As society evolved towards consumerism, this fence began to be made of expensive stone columns standing in a circle. A little later, they started to cover it with a roof. Eventually, this was all transformed into modern temples, where the attention is focused on temple decoration, magic, and the accumulation of material means, and not on the spiritual development of a person.
После всего сказанного,
After all this, it is clear that the layering of religious buildings on the sites of former pagan temples or sanctuaries was not an accident. People have always been attracted to places of power, no matter where they were or what religion they belonged to. Barbara will tell us in more detail about what sanctuaries or pagan temples were.
Yes, Elena, this is a very interesting and extensive topic. What does this book term mean? There are various explanations of origin of this name of an ancient sanctuary of our ancestors. In the Explanatory Dictionary by Ushakov, the definition of a sanctuary is a pagan temple, or kapiще. What is interesting, the word temple contains a common lexical basis which is present in many words denoting the form of a circle. In this case, a pagan temple, kapiще, is a structure round in section, or it is simply the name of a sacred place in the open air, enclosed by a circular perimeter. The root kap is the original proto-language, also seems to have meant round, and English is preserved in the word cup, ring, and this, as we know, are round-shaped. Besides, the word kapiще could also mean something that is on a hill on top. We also find that root in Latin language is the word caput, hat. It is also present in the word cupola, the upper covering of a circular premises in the shape of a hemisphere. We will talk about cupolas a little later, but for now let's go back to pagan temple, kapiще. It is notable that the Old Slavic word kap means image, sculpture, statue. This is where the name of religious building, pagan temple, kapiще, comes from. A simple pagan temple looked like a fenced circular area with a wooden or stone statue signifying some kind of a deity worshipped by the locals. As we know, a circle is an ancient symbol of a soul or manifestation from the spiritual world. A circle signifies the separation of two spheres, material and spiritual. It should be noted that we observe such a form of pagan temples among different peoples. That is, spiritual priorities prevailed in society, and originally, in places of worship, there was no place for material matters from the animal nature. As scientists continue to find traces of mysterious structures, temples, and sanctuaries, they gradually recreate a picture of ancient values and reveal to us the true knowledge by which our ancestors lived. Those people who built pagan temples had at least the knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and the physics of space. Thus, a Carpathian sun-worship settlement, the Lizina Kosmatska sanctuary, appeared on a mountain in the 5th millennium BC. The stone tomb had a specific feature: giant stones, not even stones but rocks, because they are as big as rocks, which are as if hanging in the air, perfectly fitted to each other. The most interesting thing is the astronomical nature of the sanctuary. Artifacts of the solar and zodiacal types of calendars are well preserved on Lizina Kosmatska. Not far away from Sacral Mountain, another sanctuary was found, the Ternashora sanctuary, related to the previous one, in which the cult of a woman mother was worshipped. The entire stone complex belongs to the type of calendar sanctuaries. There are evidence that ancient people knew perfectly well the starry sky, the plants, the regularities of moon phases, and the annual solar cycle. They reflected unique ancient knowledge about the universe and human, about size and symbols, not only in architectural constructions of temples, but their location, and also in drawings on stones. Therefore, calls structures as a book that can be read by anyone who has knowledge. Another feature noticed about the location of pagan temples is that they were near water, or they were well nearby. Water is a common component of nature, and in sacred knowledge of the universe, water was a symbol of a different world from the earthly one, so it was often used to signify the connection with the spiritual world. From ancient times, water acted as a feminine principle, analogs to a mother womb, as well as the fertilization of the world's egg. Some of the ancient structures are huge and resemble the symbolic map of the starry sky. The Karnak stones date back to the late 4th or 5th millennium BC and were built by the pre-Celtic inhabitants of Britain. Translated from the Breton, kark means pile of stones. They were used to watch the sunrise during the summer and winter solstice and on the days of equinox. The pagan temple, 6th century, have been found on it. It is noted that the David's Hill site of full and positive energy, and now this former shrine is considered to be one of the strongest places of power. You can learn more about megalithic structures from the Kaleidoscope of Facts, pyramids, and extraterrestrial civilizations, role of pyramids in the time of cataclysms. It is interesting that in the past, the temples did not have sacrificial altars. They appeared later, when people became more interested in magic than in spiritual development. After all, in the spiritual sense, a sacrifice to God has a completely different meaning. This word appeared in Russian in the 11th century in the connection with the spread of Christianity, and it comes from the verb formation of an old Slavic word, zhru, means making sacrifice, and zhru in its turn was used earlier by the Slavs in the meaning to devour. Old Slavic verb having Indo-European nature of origin, meaning to eat. By the way, devour was related to the Old Russian word zhivot, meaning stomach, which in ancient times meant life. From it came the Old Slavic word животное, animal, literal meaning that which lives. That is, there was introduced a kind of material sacrifice to some deity in return for receiving certain benefits in the material world. In the spiritual sense, a sacrifice to God is a sacrifice of the interest of one's animal nature, a refusal of everything bad inside oneself. Thus, it appears that originally pagan temples were not used for sacrifice. In some cases, they may have been well-known places where people came to learn spiritual knowledge from signs and symbols for centuries to share the experience, as for example, ancient people gathered in the sacred caves learning from petroglyphs, according to evidence from archaeological
that are prayed in ordinary human terms. There are places where generations have made animal sacrifices, or generations have prayed, or something like that. That is, this place of power has already been developed by generations. The stronger the intentions of people who have been in that place of power, the stronger the result will be. Let's not forget that many generations have lived before us, and there are places that are already considered as, open gates, where your practice will be faster and more successful. The shape of the temple certainly matters. In fact, what should be the main thing in many temples? There has to be actually a kind of dome, because the dome is the connection to the higher world. But since in the past there was a kind of basis, the ancient Indian temples also have this kind of dome. Not exactly, like in those religions which are popular now, but they also have their dome. The temple must be located in a certain place. An ancient Indian temple must be in the east. East is the side of the higher powers, the side of light of the higher powers. Do you know why? Because it is in the east that the sun rises. The sun is the supreme power. It is a divine power, and in the west it sets. So you see, by the position of the temple, how you can understand which forces dominate in it, even if it is positioned as the light one.
Kapisha pagan temples sometimes are identical to holy places. Such places had been marked long before Christianity and were revered by other religions and beliefs. Often, as we have seen, when one religion changed to another, the structures of the former dominant religion were destroyed and new ones were erected in the same places to honor other gods. So what are places of power? Where and how do they appear? Let's turn to the opinion of Gulnara Urazmanova, a master of biolocation and energy practice, a member of several artists and art critics union. Let's watch a video.
There are so-called geopathogenic zones with a negative sign, which we consider to be bad places, sinister places. And there are geopathogenic zones which conditionally have a positive sign. This is what is now commonly referred to as a place of power. The place of power, I think, is also a geopathogenic zone, only with a positive sign. So the place of power is where a person receives positive energy. Negative places are the ones where the energy is very harmful for people. As for certain places, especially prayerful ones, we do not have churches everywhere, we do not have crosses or some mosques, but any prayerful place is, first of all, a place of power. And in this sense, there have always been people who could identify and find such a place. Sanctuaries are simple places of worship that have been developed over years, sometimes centuries, and it is, above all, a place of the physical property of the earth, a place of power, meaning where there is positive energy. And then it was becoming surrounded by things like, in some places there appeared churches, in some places appeared chapels, in some places mosques were built. I mean, it's the same story all over the world. A place of power, in order for a person to feel that power, could be as little as 10 centimeters in diameter, give or take. It could be a small area of 60 meters in diameter, right? And that power which flows there is precisely the power of the earth, their own prayerfulness. Thousands of people came there, each worshipping their gods. And so the energy of prayerfulness always had it there.
As history shows, when material values begin to prevail in society, pilgrimage to holy places began to sharply popularize, making these events not only fashionable among the population, but also quite profitable. Priesthood initiated the erection of pompous architectural structures in which commerce flourished, focusing on outward attributes. The work of a small group of people, it was not some kind of a show or performance for the public. A group working in such places had certain practices and conducted important spiritual work. Thank you for your attention, and I give the floor to the hosts.
As we can see, places of power have always played an important role in the spiritual development of society. The special energy of these places is not mysticism, but real physics, the physics that people of knowledge knew and practiced in ancient times. And we're only now beginning to deal with this question.
Yes, Lena, you're right. Everything that we consider supernatural or magic is actually unrecognized physics of subtle energies, which people have used for themselves in different ways, depending on their worldview and the prevalence of the values and beliefs that guided them.
Yes, Oleg, you're right. What a person strives for, spiritual development or the accumulation of material goods, determines what he will come to. The ancients did not doubt the existence of God and constantly worked on themselves with the goal of inner transformation. They had no doubts, and places of power played a significant role in it. Modern humankind is always questioning about the existence of God. However, if a person is sincere in his attempts to understand, he will certainly find an answer to this question. In March, we will have another kaleidoscope of facts, scientific evidence for the existence of God. I suggest you watch the trailer.
In a critical situation, who does a person turn to in their thoughts? And who do they get help from? Believers say that God helps everyone. Atheists think it is some kind of supreme intelligence. Mages are certain of the existence of both God and the devil. So, who is God? Where to find God? What is the difference between knowing God and believing in Him? In search of answers, people are left to their own doubts, but they still go, both to church as well as to mages, just in case. Many atheist scientists, in the process of scientific discovery, have become the most devoted people to God. What irrefutable proof of God's existence have they found for their minds? Watch the 31st episode of the Kaleidoscope of Facts, Scientific Proofs of God's Existence. It's time to bring the truth back to people. Organized by participants of ALLATRA International Public Movement.
Очень интересно будет узнать.
It will be very interesting to hear what discoveries scientists have made that have led them to understand that there is a God. And we return to the subject of sacred structures and the physics of the form. I suggest watching a fragment of the interview with Andrei Mikhailovich Burovsky, Doctor of Philosophy, Professor, Historian, and Archaeologist. Firstly, it is more likely we really don't know much rather than know a lot, but we know enough to assert two very important things. First, the creation of any temple of any shape is an access to some energies. That is, mastering some forces of nature. The question is what forces? Even such a detail, temples' caves and temples' peaks. We go up or down into the dungeon. We ask higher forces for help, but what forces? Who dwells in the depth of the earth? Who ascends? Both kinds of temples require nearly the same effort, which is to descend or to ascend, but the direction is rather different. And the second thing, by performing some action, a person changes oneself. Alright, let's take up the position of a primitive atheism. There's nothing, no higher forces, nothing at all. There are no natural phenomena, there are only you and me. And the world is like plasticine. Okay, do you remember Pavel Kogan? It's ovals that since childhood I've disliked, since I was small I've drawn the angles right. And here Pavel Kogan is drawing an angle, and he doesn't like an oval. Why? He doesn't want to be in an oval, in that cosmic egg. He strongly objects to surrendering to some higher forces. And the second point, he does not want harmony, peace, silence. An oval, and not an elongated oval, but a slight oval or a circle, or let's say something rounded, is the most harmonious figure, the most stable. Do you want to be in a stable or under the stable or inside the stable? What if I don't want to? If I'm confronting the whole world, I'm carrying it in me. No, I'll draw the angle. The aggressor will not love the oval, he will love the angle. And in different states, the person will prefer different figures. Thank you very much, Andrei Mikhailovich. You have touched upon an interesting and important theme of forms. And everything in this world has its own form, including sacred buildings. That is why it is so important to understand how it all works, what processes take place at the level of energies, and how form influences the environment and us. We are moving on to the second block, where we are going to look into these questions. And let's start with the Templars and the temples that they built. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oleg. Greetings, dear friends. Before we start talking about the Templar temples, I would like to remind our viewers a little bit about the order itself. To learn more about how this mysterious order originated, what goals and objectives it set for itself, you can learn from the fourth episode of the Kaleidoscope of Facts, In Search of the Truth, the Holy Grail, Spear of Destiny, Secret Orders. So, the Order of the Templars began its existence at an important time in our history. It was then that the Holy Grail was brought back into our world by the Bodhisattva Agapitus, which the Templars later found and discovered. They gained access to knowledge and power, and through this the order gained great influence. Realizing the power that lurked in their hands, these men took a vow of poverty so as not to provoke their animal nature to be seduced by material values. They decided to devote themselves to fight the evil of this world, to serve God, and to help Mary Magdalene in her heavenly and earthly good deeds for people. They decided to create an organization that not only met these goals, but also served as a reliable support for those on the spiritual path. In Templar times, there was a renewal of spiritual knowledge, and the Templars promoted the sciences, art, and culture. Although the Templar order had plenty of money at its disposal, they did not spend it on themselves. The Templars were a real help to the people and stood up to those who sought total power over all mankind and later introduced a consumerist format to society. The Templars changed the world of politics by lending to kings, changed the face of the economy by redistributing funds. They helped poor knights who needed money. They provided money for development, subsidizing various events and trade contracts. The people knew that the Templars could be relied upon not only as reliable and valiant warriors, but also as an institution like the modern treasury, only an honest treasury, and not collecting exorbitant taxes. For example, one could take a loan from the order at 10%, while Jewish moneylenders gave loans at 40%. By the way, it was the Templars who invented the first bill of exchange, thanks to which it was not necessary to carry a lot of money and expose yourself to danger while traveling. It was enough to give money to the Templars for safekeeping, and then, by their bill of exchange, get the necessary sum of your money in another city. The Templars gave aid to the common people. They considered it a matter of honor to feed the poor in their homes. They helped people survive even in times of famine. There is an example you can find in history. When speculators in Mostera inflated the price of wheat from 3 to 33 so during the famine, the Templars fed up to 1,000 people every day for free. Naturally, because of this real, selfless concern for people, they earned genuine respect among the population. Moreover, the order built cathedrals, temples, and roads. Not only did they build good roads and even erected buildings at crossroads for the convenience of travelers, but they also guaranteed their roads from robbers. Guarded. They guaranteed that people could travel safely there. And most importantly, they did not charge a customs duty to travel on these roads, which was quite unusual for that time. The Templars created the world's largest international financial corporation, which later served as the prototype of the banking system, and ran this corporation or this institution for almost 2 centuries, guided, just note, not by profit motives, but quite the opposite philosophy, based on spiritual principles. I wonder what those places were. Today, we know that the order had many monasteries and temples at its disposal. Let's hear what archaeologist Andrei Burovsky has to say about Templar's temple.
Generally, the Templars were very mysterious guys, and they made a lot of efforts to make sure we knew as little about them as possible, colossal efforts. Those Templar temples that I observed in Britain and France, on the one hand, have a very clear irregular shape, geometrically correct. These are rectangles, and they are extremely simple and were often made without a dome. Curiously, what is called a transept or basilica in Western Christianity is a rectangular basilica without a dome, or with a small dome at the edge, in another variant. But in most cases, such temples have a crypt, that is, a secret place underneath the temple. In theory, in this crypt, a hidden place, some treasures of the temple were kept. This is typical of Christian temples in general. When enemies attacked, and temples had in store some money of the community, some sacred objects, and in case of emergency, they had to be hidden somewhere. But the Templars' crypts are in fact egg-shaped. This is a very interesting point. At least I can call two cases with absolute certainty: the Templar Temple in London and the Templar Temple in Lyon, France. These are two cases that I know personally. Perhaps there are some others. Crypts are not something hidden, they were actually shown. So it's not a secret thing. You go down a rather steep and very uncomfortable staircase, which you walk down thinking, I hope I don't break my neck, and the chamber below is small, 6 meters long, no more than that, and the floor we see nowadays is relatively flat, but it gives the impression that it has a board covering. In other words, earlier it used to be rounded too. And the upper part is clearly vaulted, with the shape of a pointed cone. I would say that is shaped like an egg. Why? It is also clear. This chamber evoked a very definite prayer state, different from the one in a rectangular-shaped temple or under a dome. But that chamber can't hold more than 10 or 15 people, even if you tried hard. So even if we take into account servants who might have helped during some rituals, there probably were about 5 or 6 people, no more than that, well, maybe even less.
Thank you, Andrei Mikhailovich. The Templars had many strongholds, monasteries, and temples at their disposal. For example, the order helped conquer the lands of the Kingdom of Leon, and as a reward, they were given many lands and strongholds on the way of St. James, where the Templars protected pilgrims. The fortress at Ponferral was half destroyed, but became a good strategic center for the order. In 1178, the Templars built their majestic castle on the River Seal, where a Celtic settlement had once been located. The polygonal building was in the style of the Templar order. The 12 towers of the castle repeated the shapes of constellations. One notable example of a Templar temple was a 12-angled structure that appears almost circular in plan. This is the church of Veracruz in Segovia, built in 1208. Its prototype was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Here is the temple itself, and here we can look at its plan. As you can see in the picture, it is a polygon with 12 faces, 2 floors, a crown of 3 chapels, and 2 portals. I would like to remind you that the shape of the iconic important structures of the Templar order has always been similar to each other. A little later, we will tell you why there was such a form and what sacred meaning it had. Let's look at the church in London, which was used as the headquarters of the order. Again, we see the circular forms that are in France, which for a long time belonged to the Templars. Although it was built back in the 9th century, it also has a rounded shape. In 1929, a gardener came to the castle. He was fascinated by the stories about the treasures that are in the dungeons of the castle. He began excavations and continued them for many years, even during the Second World War. And once his labors were successful, he discovered a passage that led to an underground chapel with 19 sarcophagi. Strangely enough, it was not investigated further, and the excavations were closed, and all entrances and exits were filled. The gardener was fired and evicted from the castle. In the early 60s, the secrets of the Templar castle resurfaced. The journalist who wrote the book Templars Among Us, Gérard Desailly, stirred society with the mysteries of the order, and André Malraux, who was then the Minister of Culture, seriously engaged in the excavations of the Gisors castle. Later, there was only one statement that the excavations were unsuccessful, nothing was found. But is this really the case? Look at what an interesting drawing of the castle has survived from those very times. We see an amazingly shaped room, an egg-shaped room. This is exactly what interests us. The place where the Templars practiced their spiritual practices. Here we can see the Templar castle in Tomar. We again see round shapes. And this is Santa Maria de Juante, a 12th century Templar church near Puente la Fasta in Spain. Let us have a look at the church of San Bartholomew, Usero, Soria. It was an important vanished Templar temple, of which only the chapel remained. Of all the Spanish temples, it has the greatest number of symbols associated with the Templars. We see that this temple has no circular forms, although it played a very important role in the life of the order. In this picture, we see the egg-shaped cave Cueva de la Zora, which is located near the temple of the order. We will talk about the sacred meaning of the egg shape a little later. But Royston Cave is an artificial cave located in Catherine Yard, Melbourne Street, Royston, England. It is protected as an ancient architectural monument. Plate 3 from Joseph Beldam's origin and use of Royston Cave, 1884, showing the shape and plan of the cave. Here we see the rounded ovoid shape found in previous caves. The artificial bell-shaped cave is covered with religious medieval carved bas-reliefs with niches for storing some artifacts. It is 7.6 meters high and 5.5 meters wide. It is believed to have been built between the 13th and 16th centuries AD. And according to some versions, it was built based on the model of the Temple of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Holes in the walls of the cave indicate that it once had a wooden floor. But by whom and for what purpose it was built remains a mystery. The cave is supposedly associated with the Knights Templar or with the Augustinian order, although others associate the carved work precisely with the Templars. Plan of the cave showing the entrance and presumably the location of the objects. Let's take a look at these pictures together. We see here very interesting images. And now we will look at Cueva de la Luna, Cave of the Moon, Toledo in Spain. The Cave of the Moon was discovered in 1952 by Armando Rico. In 1979, it was declared a provincial artistic and historical monument. A staircase leading down descends to a depth of 10 meters and ends in a dome with a radius of 2.5 meters. 3 galleries emerge from cave, of which only one is visible. All the galleries form an angle of 90 degrees. On the ceiling and walls are engraved Templar crosses. The Cave of the Moon is so named because there is speculation that there were people who came to pray in a special way. Walking through the galleries of the cave, following the lunar circles. This ritual lasted several days. The cave is formed by various galleries. On each side of these galleries are found pointed arches in the shape of an elongated oval, which allows to place a person inside. At the end of each gallery and in front of it is another pointed arch. And in the vault where the galleries intersect were the circles of the universe destroyed in 1999. The central dome has a diameter of about 5 meters. From here, 3 galleries will begin. At present, only one is accessible. At the intersection, and is located in Toledo, Spain. Let's look now at the Templar churches on Bornholm. Churches in Nillar, in Nikar, in Osterlar, and in Ole. We see the same circle at the base of the temple. On the Danish island of Bornholm, in the southwestern part of the Baltic Sea, there are 4 round-shaped churches, the likes of which do not exist in the world. These churches, built in the 11th and 12th centuries, look more like fortress towers, with 1.5 meter thick walls and pointed roofs. There is a theory that the distances between these churches and their proportions are calculated according to the secret numerical science of the Knights Templar. European Templar churches with an octagonal base are modeled on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The churches are built of large blocks of stone with walls of great thickness, sometimes even reinforced by massive buttresses with tiny loophole-shaped openings. The walled ceilings of the floors and the roof are supported by a massive circular pillar placed in the center of the church and running the entire height of the church. As we see beneath, the temples of the familiar architecture of the time, egg-shaped temples were often hidden under the floor or in the caves of the nearby mountains. There is an assumption that these were hiding places for treasures. In fact, the geometry of the space of egg-shaped temples has a deep sacred meaning, and the influence it has on a person striving for spiritual development is difficult to overestimate. Why it is so, and what influence the egg shape has, will tell us the following speakers. I thank you for your attention and would like to give a word back to our hosts.
Роберт, спасибо большое. Я впервые
Robert, thank you very much. This is the first time I've heard from you say that Templars built enclosed egg-shaped temples in addition to the well-known ones. There is another interesting fact related to the mysticism of the ovoid shape. It is interesting. Why is this shape so important? Jonathan, please tell us what kind of device Nostradamus had that enabled him to predict so many things.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Elena. So this is an interesting topic, and this is directly related to the egg shape. Let's sort out together what is the connection between this shape and the predictions. As we know, the person's aura, a person's space, resemblant to a blurry outline of an oval, as it is called in ancient time egg or fish bubble, which is larger in volume than the human body. Moreover, we have heard about the egg-shaped temples. It turned out that the egg-shaped devices composed of a certain metal can enhance a person's extrasensory abilities. I propose to watch a fragment with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov from the program Human Deflects a Laser Beam. Future can be changed.
Those who take interest in this subject have observed that from time immemorial, there were such prophecies who spoke about certain events that were supposed to happen in the future, and they really happened. That means those people saw it. How does this work? Something chaotic comes to a person's mind, and he learns to differentiate between what consciousness imposes, his personal experience, and real pictures that come, let's say, from the system, meaning those which he receives from the future. It's no secret that some prophesiers used certain supporting technologies. For instance, that very Nostradamus. Everyone heard about Nostradamus's egg. It's an egg-shaped metal structure made of various metals. It really worked. It somewhat resembles that very pyramid or something else when a person gets in there. Speaking the language clear to us, but unclear to the rest of people. Let's say, he brings changes into the excitation of stationary particles, which naturally causes mixing of the future in the present. Therefore, the person can observe. All this is again due to the structure itself.
About Nostradamus and his device, which helped him to penetrate into the future, Andrei Mikhailovich Vygotsky, doctors in philosophy, professor, historians, and archaeologists, is going to speak about it.
An image of an egg, and it's not just an oval. It can be very clearly seen that it's something exactly egg-shaped, an elongated egg, a kind of voluminous figure, but not like a chicken egg, which is slightly elongated, but a long one, that is even less stable, creating an even greater sense of movement. Maybe rolling, but in which direction, I don't know.
Let us cite some facts from history. Michel Nostradamus, later known as Nostradamus, this is the Latinized pseudonym, was born in December 14, 1503, in the small city of Saint-Rémy, in the south of France. The Nostradamus were descendants from the Jewish tribe of Issachar, and whom the book of Jeremiah says, and of the children of Issachar, which were men that has understanding of the time. In addition, the Bible states that this tribe has the gift of prophecy. You can learn more about the caste of the man that has understanding with his innate psychological inability from the kaleidoscope of fact, God of the gods. Michel's upbringing and education were greatly influenced by his grandfather, who had served as physician to King René the Good of Anjou. His grandfather spent most of his spare time with the boy and developed an interest in history and sciences. Saint Jean de Saint-Rémy, Nostradamus' grandfather, taught him how to prepare all sorts of medicines and remedies. He taught the boy Latin, Greek, Hebrew, mathematics, physics, alchemy, botany, classical literature, and as well as astronomy and astrology, which he himself had mastered. Explaining how stars from within the celestial nebulas, Michel Nostradamus' extrasensory abilities began to manifest themselves at an early age. Noticing this, his grandfather decided to introduce Michel to philosophy. From ancient thinkers to mystics and sorcerers, they studied the works of Plato, Plotinus, Erasicus, Hermes, Trismegistus, and other philosophers with a passion for practical magic. Michel Nostradamus was a gifted physician who saved many people from the plague and other severe incurable disease at the time, thus earning him unprecedented fame. But it was astronomy and astrology and mysticism that attracted him most. He practiced these things in secrecy from the authorities in order to avoid being judged by the Inquisition. He often prophesied for the royal nobility and drew up horoscopes for their children. Nostradamus' predictions worried people, especially the head of states. After all, he predicted the assassination of kings, foresaw impending disasters, wars, and revolutions. There are also predictions about our time, but modern scientists are not yet able to decipher them accurately. What is known for sure is that in the near future, we are expected to have serious earthquakes, which can cause a chain of global climatic disasters. And he also predicted that there will be a doctrine that will combine modern science with the concept of God. And thanks to this, there will be a world salvation. Everyone wonders, how could Nostradamus predict such global events with such an accuracy? We heard the answer above. Nostradamus had an egg-shaped capsule which enhanced his extrasensory abilities. A description of Nostradamus' egg. The famous 16th century fortune teller, during his meditation, was inside a custom-made egg-shaped capsule about 2 meters high. Its shell consisted of 3 layers, copper, brass, and bronze, fastened with silver wire. The lower part of the egg was flat and set on the floor. The upper part was open. One of Century 1, which opened Nostradamus' prophetic book. Sitting alone at night in secret study, it is placed on the brass tripod. A slight flame comes out of the emptiness and makes successful that which should not be believed in vain. There is information that Nostradamus did not invent this egg, but received its drawing from the Freemason. It was a member of their society. Also, researchers said that a similar device was known to the Templars. The hole where the egg was located was not easy either. Not even friends were allowed in it, nor should his influence on the egg be ruled out. Perhaps the egg was just one part of the magical mechanism that made up the whole house of the famous diviner and alchemist. It is very likely that the house itself was also one of the envelopes shielding the host from the outside world. At the moment on Earth, to conduct their experiment in this environment. And they have had some success in this regard. The electromagnetic field in the chamber was weakened more than 50,000 times. Experiment with people showed that in such a chamber, the left hemisphere becomes more active. Inhibitory process go away. The nervous systems calm down, physiological process normalized, and the psi balance out. Many people have noticed an improvement in memory, situation of an intellect and creativity, and even the appearance of psychic ability. However, we would like to draw your attention. Hypomagnetic conditions are recognized as conditions that can cause harm to humans. If the geomagnetic field decreases by a factor of 4, you can stay in this condition for not more than 2 hours per shift. Here are some results of the effect of stimulated hypomagnetic condition in biological effect. Natural changes in the Earth's geomagnetic field cause deterioration of the cardiovascular and vegetative nervous system activity and decrease in human performance. Weakening factor of 500 was detected when experimenting with blood for 48 hours. The loss of copper iron from the plasma was greater than under normal conditions. Interesting was the result with rats. Under decrease of the magnetic field by 5 times within 10 days, 19 hours a day, interspecies aggression in rats were revealed, as well as the depressive behavior and increase of interspecies aggression. If you are wondering why astronauts are not negatively affected by the decrease in the Earth's magnetic field while in orbit for years, the answer is very simple. It is not decreased enough to cause harm, but it does contribute to another important effect that makes astronauts want to go back into space again and again. The fact is that a slight decrease in the magnetic field allows a person to feel a personality in spiritual plane, to feel more inner freedom. The secret principle of Nostradamus' eggs was attempted by Nikolai Kozyriev. Kozyriev experiment with shiny aluminum spiral-shaped plates were actually conducted at the Novosibirsk Secret Institute. The operator inside Kozyriev mirrors began to see different visions. How it is possible to such a difference in form and composition of metal structure have the same effect on the operator inside? You will learn about the prophecy and of some material and the effect of the shaped effect from our kaleidoscope of fact. And now I pass the floor to the next speaker, and we will find out what importance of the egg-shaped is, what effect it has on the space around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. It is interesting that many peoples around the world have a reference to the shape of an egg in one way or another. We can find this in myths, in various legends, and in various everyday objects. The myths on many peoples of the world refer to the creation of the universe from an egg. The egg-shaped form was not chosen by our ancestors accidentally. If we look deeper, we can see what kind of deep knowledge about physics of an egg shape and its properties people of ancient times actually had. Let's watch a fragment of an interview with the historian and archaeologist Andrei Burovsky about the prototype of everything.
After all, an egg is the foretype of all of creation. What's an egg? It's a leathery or calcareous shell, protein and nutrients that are the basis for the development of an embryo. All eggs of reptiles and birds are arranged in this way. From here, the future organisms grow up. It's exactly the same in the body of a female mammal. The only difference is that an egg begins to develop not outside this body, but inside. So the egg is a foretype of the universe we all know, the world that emerges from an egg. And in many mythological systems, including late historical and complex systems such as Buddhism, there is an image of the cosmic egg. In Hinduism, Shiva Nataraja activates the egg with his dance, and all of creation emerges from it. There's nothing new here. Yes, it is a foretype, something that everything emerged from. There was an egg, and then someone, usually a deity, broke it, and it all began. The development began.
Thank you very much, Andrei Mikhailovich, for this very interesting information. Also, I would like to point out that according to Dogon mythology, the world arose from the word Ama. There was nothing but this world. But this word, the first word, gave rise to an infinitely small basic element of the world, which the Dogon called Kizi-Uzi, which is actually the millet seed po. By means of an internal vibration, the Kizi-Uzi turned into the world egg. In the Dogon myths, Amma has the epithet of spinning a vertex, and it is noted that its motion moves along a spiral.
If we examine this ancient knowledge from the perspective of physics, we can find direct indications that it is the vortex motion that occupies a central place in the creation of the universe, and that the egg-like form plays a key role in this. What is the significance of vortices in spiral motions? We'll talk about that a little later, but for now, remember this information that the egg, if you may say so, is the child of the vortex and is always associated with a spiral motion. To better understand the relationship between the egg-like form and vortex motion, let's first look at its properties, and let's listen to Professor, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Konstantin Korotkov.
Egg-shaped form affects the condition. So there is a device called the biotron. It was first created by Xian Kanzhen, such an interesting man, a scientist and an outstanding person. Now the device is also being made. Now there is a whole trend of making these biotrons. As a rule, this is an egg-shaped chamber in which there is a person and sprouts are placed there. And these sprouts, when they grow, they really emit a very special energy, a powerful, particular energy. But it's not without reason, you know, the sprout. We've seen how many of them break through the asphalt. Or when I've been near an active volcano, there is fresh lava. It's just recently frozen, and already a sprout is coming out from underneath it. Can you imagine what a powerful force, what kind of energy it is to break through like that? That's why it is used now, i.e., it is calculated in such a way that a human being should be in the focus of this radiation. And this is normal geometrical optics that works. Not without reason, the egg is the basis of life, at least of birds' or chickens' life. And this is really the most optimal form, both in terms of safety of this shell and in terms of energy influence. Because the thing is, an egg is really a kind of geometrical accumulator, which focuses all the radiation that comes from outside inside, in the central point. If there is this radiation, And what is radiation? Excuse me, we're always in a field of radiation. Even if you forget all of our man-made stuff, we're in a field of geomagnetic radiation, always. And that's the basis of life. Now, there are already many experiments which show that without this geomagnetic field, life is impossible. It withers away. And this is a proven fact. Luc Montagnier proved it, and our scientists proved it. That's why it's quite clear that the egg does accumulate some radiation, but it doesn't absorb it. It accumulates it and concentrates it in the center, where the yolk is, where new life develops.
Спасибо большое, Константин Георгиевич. Это очень интересно.
Thank you very much, Konstantin Georgievich. It's a very important information about the fact that an egg is an optimal shape for the emergence of life. This egg shape is capable of accumulating the charge. More about the geometrical properties of an egg will tell us by Nina Sorokina, researcher and author of articles.
It is no accident that nature chose the egg, or ovoid, as it is called scientifically, to generate the energy of creation and to create the genetic material. Because the egg is a real natural battery. It is so arranged geometrically that the life that is maturing inside it, when separate from mother, could attract enough life force from outside, from all the variety of spatial waves that are always there around us, including the main field for us, the gravitational field of the Earth. What does life force mean? We can define it as the ability to attract and hold a charge. The more charge-carrying waves a biological object can collect in one place, the more viable it is, the more alive it is. There is a physicist named Dan Winter who does research on the borderline between spirituality and physics. He claims that the egg is a biological capacitor of very high capacity. What's a capacitor? It's an accumulator of charge. If you touch the opposite ends of a fresh egg, exactly a fresh egg, you can feel a faint discharge. This is the result of a voltage that varies from 4 to 12 volts. He measured it and even showed it to me when I was at his seminar once. So if you want to buy a fresh egg in a store, you should take a voltmeter with you. An egg creates an electrical potential, and that's the source of its self-sufficiency and ability to sustain itself energetically. Although reptile and bird eggs may vary greatly in shape, some are more elongated and some are more round, they all have the golden ratio. We know what the golden ratio is, 6.618. Why do eggs have exactly the golden ratio in them? The fact is that we don't get our energy from nowhere. It always comes to us from other bioemitters, primarily from the Sun for all the planets in the solar system. And inside the planet, it comes from the mountains, from the seas, from the rivers, from other living things. And if the radiation is friendly to ours, that is, enters with it in resonance, in constructive interference, then both the vibrations are mutually amplified, and what we call harmony or constructive interference in science occurs. If not, if it is not friendly to our energy, then the two vibrations are mutually weakened, and destructive interference or discord occurs. And all harmonious beings, of course, strive to become coherent and harmonious. They strive to increase their vibration by finding a frequency that gives maximum coherence with everyone else. How does one find that maximum coherence? For all living beings, at least those who live in our version of the universe, it has to do with the golden proportion, or it's called the golden ratio. It plays a kind of unified standard, a cosmic quality standard, one might say. Because of its unique properties, this number is truly universal and inseparable from life in general in all its manifestations. It can be found in the ratio of body parts of living organisms, in the ratio of orbital sizes, sizes of celestial bodies, including the Earth and the Moon, I studied this issue in sufficient detail, and elementary particles. Simply put, it is contained this number in everything that breathes, moves, or emanates waves. And of course, it's no coincidence that the egg as a repository of genetic material also has the golden ratio in it. It will amplify those waves that come into resonance with it and resonate exactly with the golden proportion or the golden ratio. So we found out that it's as if the egg filters out the waves that are friendly to it and that increase its life force charge, and it rejects the rest. So it's very hard to imagine. I understand, but here is a good image of Matryoshka doll. Let's say there are 7 Matryoshkas, one inside the other, they in certain harmony, in a certain proportion. That is, if you try to put some other Matryoshka doll in there, it looks like a Matryoshka doll too, but it's not proportional or harmonious with them, it won't fit in, it will fall out. This is roughly what happens with waves. That is, they are inserted into each other, and only waves of certain proportions get along well with each other. The golden proportion is standard in this sense. That is, Matryoshkas are built according to the principle of resonance of the golden ratio. Based on this property of the egg, to sort out the necessary vibrations and resonate with those that carry life force, that very physicist Dan Winter, whom I mentioned recently, invented an egg-shaped device. It seems once he even made one out of a natural ostrich egg, which he coated with a very thin layer of gold inside. He attached a voltmeter to it and used this device to measure the life force of biological objects. That is, he could put some herbal medicine or something else into it and see how much life force it had. I saw this device. He showed it to us at the seminar. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Nina. The amazing fact is also that not only is the shape of an egg based on the principle of the golden ratio, but the golden ratio itself creates a spiral that resembles the shape of an egg. The egg is an infinite collection of spirals of the golden ratio. This is why the egg from which the universe was created is called the golden egg in myth. That is, we have references to the golden ratio. The unique properties of the egg-like form have been mentioned by great scientists. One of those who studied the ovoid shape was Victor Schauberger. Victor Schauberger, an ordinary Austrian forester, genius inventor, and physicist, made a fundamental discoveries of the 20th century. By studying the properties of eddy currents, he opened up entirely new sources of energy for humankind. Schauberger can be regarded as the founder of vortex technology and self-supported hydrodynamic systems, which provide devices with efficiencies greater than 1. His scientific work ranges from hydrotransportation of timber, hydropower, thermodynamics, and ecology to flying saucers. But despite this, throughout his life, his discoveries have been hushed up and backed off. Based on the natural swirling of water and air, Schauberger had designed many home power plants and even aircraft engines. In 1930, Victor Schauberger built his first water enrichment machine in the egg-like form. He felt that the water had to be in constant motion to stay living. The only container shape that allows a constant internal spiral movement is egg-shaped. The shape of an egg was one of Victor Schauberger's favorite shapes. After all, it is a model of the golden ratio. Mathematical calculations show that the golden ratio is the only possible way of combining the properties of unity and diversity in which the continuity and discreteness of life are contained. The egg contains the germs of life and motion, although it possesses neither. It is a kind of blob of the future universe. It is not yet in reality, but it is already forming as a unit, as the potential for future action. Victor Schauberger discovered that the geometric shape of the egg itself contributes to the natural emergence of spiral motion, both inside and outside. Within the ovoid shape itself, there are two flows of energy. One is directed inwards and one is directed outwards. Roughly speaking, an egg is a vortex turned inside out. Where there is a life, there is a vortex movement. In terms of geometry, the ovoid shape is formed inside of hyperbolic vortex. Therefore, as stated earlier, an egg is the child of a vortex. A vortex is a tornado vortex that can be described as a mathematical function. This was discovered by Victor Schauberger's son, Walter. In order to scientifically justify the formation of vortices in an ovoid shape, Walter Schauberger developed the theory of the hyperbolic cone. This refers to the so-called sounding tower. He used Pythagoras' monocode to study wave processes. Pythagoras was also looking for a universal law of the universe, and for this purpose he studied sound. And by the way, he came to the conclusion that Pythagoras calculated the relationship between frequencies and the string's length of a musical instrument. For example, if you halve the length of the string, you obtain twice the frequency in relation to the basis frequency, etc. This is so-called harmonic scale. It is shown in the picture. Oscillations with the lowest frequencies are called the fundamental first harmonic, and those with subsequent frequencies, the higher frequency, second, third, and so on harmonics. They are still often used to describe various wave processes in nature. Mathematically, it looks like the law of the hyperbolic function, y equals 1 divided by x. This is a curve which in mathematics is called a hyperbola. If we rotate this figure around its axis, we obtain a hyperbolic funnel. If we turn this funnel upside down, we get a vortex. So the water forms a hyperbolic vortex, exactly corresponding to the law of sound. If such a vortex is cut diagonally, you can get an egg-like figure. By superimposing second planes on such a hyperbolic cone at different heights and angles, one can obtain different egg-shaped curves. Thus, and it is well seen in the picture, the egg shape mathematically obtained as a section of the hyperbolic funnel is the most perfect receptacle for its own inner funnel. The hyperbolic function is a universal law of nature. Planets, stars, galaxies, and their clusters, and the universe itself move in a spiral. The hyperbolic Kepler's equation is used to calculate their motion. Indeed, spiral motion is a universal law of the universe, which is fully reflected in the ovoid shape. Again, we come to vortices in the ovoid shape. So how did Victor Schauberger discover such properties of the ovoid shape? One moonlit, cold winter night, he saw in a body of water formed by a mountain stream stones the size of a headrise from the ground and cycling like a trout before a big jump, flow to the surface of the water, swaying on it, heavy stones, Schauberger couldn't believe his eyes. What force was lifting them? Nina Sorokina will tell us more about it.
Schauberger actually observed how once on a cold and very moonlit winter night, perhaps it was even a full moon, very large stones, the size of a human head, rose to the surface of a mountain stream and were levitating there for some time on the surface. But not all the stones were levitating, only those that were very smooth and egg-shaped. The rest were just lying there as stones are supposed to do. Now, why was this happening? We found out that an egg shape creates a vortex. And water also forms vortices similar to a tornado, only we call them whirlpools or water funnels. And just like in a tornado, in such vortices there are always two currents, two equally easily moved in vortices, thus escaping the law of gravity. This can easily be checked if you take a round, tall, thin jar, fill it with water and put an egg into it, then stir the water gently with a stick to create a vortex, and you can see the egg slowly rising from the bottom, floating up and staying there as long as the vortex is maintained. That is, an egg is sucked up by that of the two currents which is directed upwards. So this is also explained by vortex flow, a bidirectional flow, not a unidirectional one.
Thank you, Nina. The fact that the stones floated up and stayed on the surface of the water is indeed due to their shape. After all, the egg has a natural tendency to rotate on its longitudinal axis, and thus uses the axis of a vortex. Thus, it rises to the surface and remains there as long as the whirl is maintained. So, Schauberger noticed that egg-shaped bodies create a vortex motion not only inside themselves, but also outside, generating waves of regular geometry in water or air. This property makes the environment in which they reside more alive. The picture shows a graphical longitudinal section of a river bed, showing how a simple egg-shaped structure can be used to swirl the water masses and mix the cold groundwater with the warm surface water, giving the river water the correct temperature. Note the spiral swirls formed at the sharp end of the egg. But perhaps Schauberger's most important discovery was the power of explosion-free destruction. Victor Schauberger believed that the interest to it, the centrifugal energy of destruction which directs the vortex outwards, that is, gives it a left-handed rotation. All processes in the observable world were seen by Victor Schauberger as manifestations of unity, the essence of which is vortex motion. All kinds of motion have two components, he wrote in Implosion magazine. The energy of one is directed inward and of the other is directed outwards. Both regulate the constant transformation of energy and the renewal of matter. The principle of Victor Schauberger's devices was based precisely on the vortex motion of energy directed inwards. This he called implosion. For living objects, implosion is the process of concentrating energy and nutrients to form life. In the example of a chicken egg, all the nutrients are concentrated in the yolk. And implosion in technical devices is the process of creating a negative pressure by which a certain work can be done. Pressure and suction, and most importantly, the temperature gradient must change in the right direction inwards, not outwards. In this case, the required energy is released and collected at the cross point. Is the answer to that question. First, its body shape is the result of a combination of three ovoid shapes. Two elongated in the shape of seeds, or grains, and another in the shape of an egg. As the ovoid shape has a certain proximity to the vortex, the resistance of the shape to forward motion or any pressure is much lower than it would be with any other shape. Secondly, trout always seek the part of the water stream where the water is densest and coldest, and the longitudinal vortex is most intense. That is, the water has a natural swirl that is parallel to the direction of the current flow. These are the longitudinal eddies. Because of the centripetal action of these longitudinal eddies, in which the water mass rotates inwards, the densest and coldest water is always in the center. For this reason, an immobile the trout's body is created. Therefore, the trout can stand still in the fast flow of water. If it is necessary to speed up the upstream movement, the trout uses the properties of implosion. To do so, it starts flapping its gills, creating additional eddies. In this way, the trout increases the upstream thrust of the stream against the current, and due to the difference in internal and external pressure and certain physical-chemical processes, the trout jumps out like soap from wet hands when squeezed. In this way, the trout use the energy of the vortex for the movement against the current. Based on the properties of the vortex and the ovoid shape, scientists are still creating many different inventions today. Mr. Dan Davidson, a researcher in this field of gravitational physics and free energy systems and electronic medicine, will tell us about his invention.
The egg shape is a round circular chamber, and if you look at a shape art book, a circular chamber, all of the energy focuses into the middle of the chamber. And so the egg shape is a natural focus for energies from the ether. I've got a lab stir here that I've made, and the lab stir amounts to a flask that has a magnet in the bottom, and it gets hooked by the magnetic field to a magnet in the thing that it sets on. So when you turn on the spinner in the machine, spins the magnet in the lab stir bottle, and it charges the water up. Every time you put water in a vortex, it starts charging and pulling energy off out of the ether, and it charges the water. I've measured up to 10,000 volts in my lab stir here, in the vortex that's formed on the inside of the lab stir. There are numerous egg-shaped constructions. For example, egg-shaped temples in the rocks, numerous rock churches, where the structure builds as an egg shape. It focuses the etheric energies in the atmosphere about the person or about whoever's in the chamber, and focuses it all around from the outside of the chamber into the inside of the chamber, and keeps charging in there based on the shape. So it's a circular shape.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. We have learned a great deal today about the properties of the egg form, but that is only a small part of what we have been able to study, and that is at the level of conventional physics of the visible world. But there is more that lies beyond quantum physics, what is now called metaphysics. People knew about these laws and used them successfully. Such examples are the egg-shaped temples and the Nostradamus capsule, which are based on the egg-shaped effect. We will tell you about why people of antiquity build egg-shaped temples in February in the second part of the Kaleidoscope of Facts, Mystery of Sacred Structures. Thank you for your attention, and I pass the floor to the hosts.
Thank you, Natalia. It is amazing how many mysteries the ovoid shape holds. The physics of the processes that take place in it is simply amazing. No wonder the egg is a symbol of the birth of life in the universe, the generator of life.
Yes, very interesting. And I was struck by the information that with the help of certain technical means, it is possible to look into the future. Nostradamus and Nikolai Kozyrev did it. Using different in shape.
Believe that the time is a substance through which information is transmitted instantly throughout all points of the universe. He also said that the time is a special kind of energy which is expressed in a cause and effect relations. They are always separated from one another in space and do not depend on the system of coordinates. Kozyrev called his theory causal mechanics. According to it, the energy of time feeds stars, and therefore nuclear fusion inside of them never stops. Kozyrev proved by his experiments that the time has physical properties that are characteristic of a substance: flow and directionality of its course. Moreover, the activity of the influence of time on systems and processes can be more or less. And since time is involved in all processes, they will either speed up or slow down. Kozyrev called this variable property discovered by him as the density or intensity of time. It was found out that in some physical processes, time is absorbed and its density increases, while in others, on the contrary, time is spent increasing the release of energy. In this case, the density of time decreases. Another discovery, albeit in an implicit form, was made by Kozyrev, namely the flow of time carries in itself the moment of rotation. In the middle of the 20th century, Nikolai Kozyrev analyzed the result of his astronomical observations and laboratory experiments and came to the conclusion that all life forms, as if draw energy from some invisible spiral source. For the first time in the history of world science, two global projects were carried out: the Polar Circle experiment in December 1991 and the Banner of Peace experiment in June 1993. The purpose of these experimental works was to study the Earth's information field using the Kozyrev mirrors and the method of distant image communications between people located in various regions of the planet. Time has different density or activity level in different corners of the universe, and all physical processes in the universe occur with absorption or release of time. It should be noted that this theory did not emerge from nothing. It is based on the works of Albert Einstein and Hermann Minkowski. It follows from their works that gravity is a distortion of space, while time is one of the characteristics of space distortion. How this device works. To confirm his hypothesis that the time is not an abstract quantity but rather has a direction and energy, Nikolai Kozyrev designed a structure of a telescope with aluminum mini mirrors. This telescope later served as the basis for the Kozyrev mirrors, which was named after him. Kozyrev mirrors are a spiral cylindrical structure with its focus in the center. The structure was made of a special aluminum alloy. The usual structure of the Kozyrev mirrors is as follows. A polished aluminum flexible mirror sheet is rolled clockwise in 1.5 turns, 1.5 turns, inside of which the testing person's chair and measurement equipment are placed. Nikolai Kozyrev designed them to experimentally confirm his hypothesis that time is not an abstract value, but rather has a direction and energy, that it is material and therefore it is possible to get back to the past and get into the future. In this case, we are talking about peeking into the future. That is, these mirrors tune a person to a certain wave, where a person perceives information fragmentarily as images, so as if he is watching a movie in fragments. Interestingly, Kozyrev repeatedly registered one important fact during the laboratory experiments. strong emotional energy of those present in there, and sudden changes in human consciousness can influence the course of the experiment. And though in Kozyrov's experiments this question was not specifically researched, the effect of consciousness on the course and the results of the experiments was perceived by the scientists as a reality and was taken into account in the organization of the experiments. Kozyrov quite assumed that physical processes in the universe can be directly controlled and directed by consciousness, including human consciousness. The first experiments with Kozyrov mirrors began in 1989 at the Institute of Cosmic Anthropoecology in Novosibirsk. A group of scientists led by academician Kaznachev began research on remote transmission of information in the form of thought images. One of the goals was to study a person's clairvoyance abilities and to train these abilities, to foresee the future and to be able to peek into the events of the past. A cycle of long-term studies on the Kozyrov space was launched at Dixon, theoretically allowing the presence of past and future in the present, and the possibility of observing events that have not yet occurred. The scientists themselves said that when the mirror system was installed, they were unable to go inside for 24 hours. It was fear that disturbed all of the test subjects. Only after 24 hours did the bravest of the experimenters manage to take a seat inside the system. All of the subjects began to feel very unwell. They felt dizzy, they felt nauseous, their blood pressure went up or dropped. They could not cope with the fear, and they also had headaches. At the same time, some people experienced the sensation of leaving their bodies, while others actually saw some fragmentary images, more often from the past. They observed themselves from kind of like aside and heard voices of people from their childhood. Each time the experiment had to be interrupted due to people's poor well-being. Feeling unwell. After the first sessions, changes were made to the structure of the mirrors and the research continued. But already after the first sessions, one of the experimenters got information how real actual mirrors should look like. By order of the ICEM, Novosibirsk Institute of Clinical Experimental Medicine, at the Chkalov plant were made aluminum spheres, which represented huge glasses, total 8 glasses with a height of 2.5 meters. Then 4 people were selected, 2 men and the same number of women, employees of the institute. The experiment lasted for 3 months. Sessions were held 3 times a week for 40 minutes each. People placed in cylindrical spirals experienced a variety of abnormal psychophysical sensations. For example, in the protocols of the Institute of Experimental Medicine of the Siberian branch of the Academy of Science, scientists recorded the following results. Subjects inside Kozyrov mirrors felt leaving their own bodies, cases of telekinesis, telepathy, transmission of thoughts at a distance. Kaznachev said, when we work with people who are prone to psychosomatic diseases, we get an extraordinary clinical effect, and if 2 people are in Kozyrov mirrors, then a so-called transpersonal information contact can be established between them. In other words, simply put, telepathy. 2 multi-day experiments were conducted in which people who were thousands of kilometers apart transmitted information to one another. But of particular interest are the cases of time travel. One day before the experiment, the scientists smelled ozone and experienced the feeling of overwhelming fear as they approached the mirror installation. The researcher who entered the Kozyrov mirror saw a stream of symbols. It seemed to him that they glowed like neon signs. Later it turned out that these signs correlated with the culture of ancient Sumer. That is, these symbols broke into our time from the distant past. There were also cases when the subjects had heightened, increased supersensory perception. Some felt themselves as participants of historic events, others saw the future. So, how a person perceives information from the future, we will learn from an expert of the video with Igor Mikhailovich Danilov. Human deflects a laser beam. Future can be changed.
Let's say, can the device allow tuning a person to that wave, which could shift his perception? I emphasize, not consciousness, not him, but his perception, to a certain remote future. Is that interesting? It is interesting that a person perceives it all at the level of pictures, first and foremost. If someone remembers and has been keen on this subject, let's say, while for those who haven't been keen on it and haven't been interested, but an interest would arise, you can read how Nostradamus described his experience, how that very Casey and other famous prophesiers, or clairvoyants, they are called differently, how they perceived the future. All of them perceived the future exactly as a movie in front of their eyes, meaning they saw. Some of them even felt that they were present, but they were present in the future, incorporeally. I mean, it's like there are eyes, but nothing else. And so they saw those fragments, perceived them, and so on.
So, it becomes clear from the video that the training of the operator who will be in the device is also important. What is important is his ability to enter an altered state of consciousness and the ability to differentiate images created by his own consciousness from real or true images of the possible future coming from the general unified information field. We see that the Kozyrev and Nostradamus structures had different shapes. That is, in these cases, the determining factor in the works of the device is not the form but the material itself, although the form also matters. Just like the pyramid of the Coordination Center of International Public Movement, ALLATRA, which we will talk about a bit later, the Kozyrev mirrors are made of aluminum alloy. This is a material that is characterized by phantom viscosity. It is the phantom viscosity that causes the distortion of space and time for the object inside. We will talk more about what...
Tali and Dushan will tell us about it, but first I would like to give the floor to Professor Konstantin Korotkov, Doctor of Engineering.
As we said before, the geometric shape of structures affects the surrounding space, and it affects the space inside in a certain way. If we have some data on the surrounding space, I've done research and it was published. But we have very little data on how it affects the inside. Take the pyramid, and we understand a big, huge difference between the pyramid of Cheops, where there is a whole network of chambers, a whole network of tunnels of some kind. We still do not understand their purpose, but each chamber and each tunnel has its own purpose. It is very difficult to compare it with a pyramid, let's say an artificial one, which as a rule is hollow, and inside the pyramid there are also some spaces where you can stay, but it is quite different. There were measurements inside the pyramids, but they were not numerous, so we can only recount them. 1, 2, 3. There was measurement inside the chamber, the king's chamber of the Cheops pyramid. So, as a rule, it had a very negative effect on all the people there, just very negative. There were measurements in this artificial pyramid in Siberia. We have some pyramid. We want to understand what happens in it, and we should measure in it. There have been no such measurements as far as I know, but except for some individual ones, as I said. So it's a very interesting question. There is an influence, no doubt, and that would be an interesting issue to investigate.
Thank you so much, Konstantin Georgievich. You are right. It's really interesting to understand how the shape affects the surrounding space. Today we have already talked about the pyramids in ancient Egypt. The accuracy of their parameters allowed scientists to say that these are complex engineering and technical structures. Thanks to the pyramidal shape, ancient builders created conditions for changing the physics of space. Dr. Sam Osmanagic, researcher of the Bosnian pyramids, will tell us how the pyramids interact with the Earth's energy. And
our Mother Earth is huge energy ball. When you have energy balls, you have energy flows. Two strongest energy flows on our planet, north-south, east-west. You build four-sided pyramid. You orient those four sides to the cardinal points. It initiates the movement of the energy inside the pyramid. So the first energy flow within the pyramid goes from the bottom, hitting 1/3 of the height, coming back inside, going to 2/3, coming back to 1/3, and completing the circle. 2D, it looks like a triangle and circle. 3D, you have movement of the energy inside the pyramid, and interestingly enough, so-called kings and queens chambers in the Great Pyramid of Egypt are built exactly on the way of this energy flow. Why? Well, being exposed to the pyramid energy, it improves the molecular structure of human beings. So, this is the first energy flow, which is tied to the orientation of the pyramids. However, there are two more energy flows. The moment you have the pyramid culture, even the societies and the social aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Osmanagic. Now it becomes clear that the pyramids and our planet work as a single mechanism, thanks to which various transformation of energies take place. These energies are observed as radiations and various resonance acoustic phenomena. But the pyramids can not only receive and transform the energy of the Earth, they are also able to generate energy and weak radiations. This happens thanks to so-called shape effect. The shape effect occurs when weak radiations interact with materials and objects of the surrounding world. Grebenikov's figure shows that this radiation is concentrated at the very top, in the center of the pyramid and slightly at the corners of the pyramid. And in the photo made with the help of the Kirlian method, it is clearly seen that at the top, this radiation has a form of a double spiral. The photo is presented in the book Shape Power by Dan Davidson, a researcher of shape radiation. And now Dusan will tell us a little bit more about the interesting experiments.
Thank you, Tali. Another proof of the energy flow inside the pyramids is the following experiment. Two straws were hung on the thinnest thread and placed one in a flask and another in a pyramid. The pyramid was made of 3 mm thick glass, with a base side length of 207 mm. Its proportions were the same as those of the pyramid of Khufu. The straw located in the pyramid rotated clockwise during the whole cycle of observations. The position of the second straw in a control flask remained unchanged during all times of observations. The detectors placed in the region of maximum radiation also register various effects: acceleration or slowing down of processes, change of electric resistance, and so on. Besides radiation and transformation of energies, the pyramid has other properties. Dan Davidson, the author of the book Shape Power, will tell us more about them.
The pyramid, of course, is a radiating shape, It creates, collects energy, and shoots it off the top of the pyramid. And all the pyramids do that are shaped that way. And they were built primarily to be places of power, to draw power forth for the earth itself. They were used in all kinds of situations. They were used for communication. If you've analyzed the pyramid energy, the energy is focused at the vertexes at the top and at the four corners. You can have a pyramid that is made strictly by wires of the outer edge and get the same effect as a solid pyramid because of the when two lines come together, they create a magnetic field. So in a corner, you've got three lines coming together, or four lines, or whatever, and they will focus energy in that corner. Now, on a pyramid, since they're all symmetrical, they all focus at the same point, which is the 1/3 level in the pyramid. And that's why when Flanagan and those guys desiccated meat and what have you in the pyramid, it was found to work in the 1/3 level of the pyramid in the center. How does the physical form relate to energy accumulation? I don't know, I've been talking about that the whole time. When you intersect two lines, you create a vortex, and it creates a focus for the ether. And you put a bunch of those vortexes together and focus them together, they create an intense focus. Like the five corners of a pyramid all focus energy to the center of the pyramid at the 1/3 level. And so they create an intense focus at that 1/3 level and do whatever they're doing. And the next level is you're a controller and director of energy. A controller and director of energy has the capability, depending on their level of power that they have, the amount of power they can wield, is they can do various things from that level.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I would like to highlight a few important points you mentioned. The first one is the use of pyramids for communication, that is, the transmission of information at a distance. The second point is that the shape effect works regardless of whether the object is made of a solid material or is simply an outline of wire. And the third one, a very important point, is that it is possible to use the pyramid's energy, but in order to do so, the operator, the one who will direct the pyramid's energy, must possess a certain level of personal power. What other conditions must be met for the pyramid shape to work? I give the floor to Tali.
Yes, Dushan, thank you. So there are several such conditions. It should be noted that the pyramid-shaped structures need certain properties and precise orientation to the sides of the world to enhance their effect. And the bigger is the size of the pyramid, the more precisely it should be oriented in the north-south direction. If the orientation is incorrect, the shape effect weakens. And if the angle of 7 degrees is exceeded, it disappears at all. Alexey Valerievich Mitin, a researcher of alternative technologies, will tell us more about the importance of such orientation in the video.
The Earth is also a crystal, and it works according to certain rules. If we put into this crystal the same crystal structure, which is coherent in this environment, that is, not just chaotic as I have shown, but exactly coherent. So the pyramid is a coherent crystal, which stands and amplifies energy in amplitude. And if we turn it slightly, it will not work. As a matter of fact, the pyramids are ruined now. They used to have cladding, they had a certain top, they enhanced the flow of energy, they served as accumulators of energy, let's put it this way. Any menhirs that the ancients used, Stonehenge is menhirs, built in a certain sequence in order to, let's say, amplify the external energy when energy goes through a crystal structure. Dolmens are also a prime example of the use of these crystal materials by the ancients. There are a great number of them. And now we recklessly build large buildings according to a certain architectural plan, and hence get a very negative effect. When energy is being drawn out of a person placed in this crystal serves as a source of energy. It can be drawn from him. He can serve as a generator from which the crystal, this structure, draws energy. There are a lot of examples like that. At the Egyptian complex in Giza, from an aerial view, we can see that this system has a certain structure. That is, it probably served for some kind of cults, maybe for signal transmission. There are many versions about it, as protective constructions, and pyramids are also some kind of transmitters, but they are constructed according to other principles, according to the principle of a big array of crystal substances, which naturally strengthened everything there. If we put some object in 1/3 of a pyramid, it will be mummified, preserved. It's the so-called radiation of death, so to speak. It is a certain structure that draws energy from a biological object. The question is, what were they used for? There are a lot of them on Earth, and they are found in America, in Antarctica, a lot of them. Kailas is a pyramid, you know it perfectly well. They are scattered all over the globe. Most likely, they were built in the so-called energy hubs and served precisely to create energy of a special kind. This is, let's say, a new kind of electricity, which was used by the ancients, but which we have forgotten, and now use another kind of electricity, longitudinal waves, not transverse waves, but longitudinal, when the electrostatic field works, having a dynamic character of propagation, that is, by impulses, compacting the medium, and so on. Completely different path. The energy that we've created is a completely different kind of energy. It's not typical for the energy of that time. But the ancients used it. If they built these pyramids, they must have built them for a reason, using enormous resources, effort and time. Can you imagine how long it takes to build such a pyramid? How many human resources are required just to build some physical object, which actually doesn't make any sense from a practical point of view? It doesn't make sense. We plow the land, that's understandable. We need to create something, some irrigation facilities. But what is this for? To bury one pharaoh there? Nonsense. Moreover, pharaohs were never buried there. They always lie there, but we find them in other places as well. What are they for? What did the megaliths exist for? Those huge slabs, huge structures. What were they built for? Was there any purpose for that? Well, probably for this very purpose. To manipulate energy
effects. For example, the mummification effect is observed in the pyramids, which was discovered at the beginning of last century by French scientist Antoine Bois. The Czech engineer Karl Drbal got interested in his research, and he discovered that connection between the shape of the pyramid and various processes taking place inside of it. For example, a razor blade placed inside of the pyramid at a height of 1/3 from the foundation turned out to be sharpened after some time. Later, the same experiments were carried out. Photographs of blades under the electron microscope clearly showed change of the geometry before and after being placed inside of the pyramid. And the opposite effect was also observed. According to the data of the professor of Munich Polytech Institute, Eichheimer, The blade blunted if there was no exact orientation of the pyramid to the sides of the world. And this fact is also confirmed by the pictures made by the electron microscope. Now, let me pass the floor to Dusan.
In the 60s, the famous Egyptologist Enel, his real name was Mikhail Vladimirovich Saryatin, also studied the pyramids. He found out that the radiation of the pyramid has special properties. Probably it is connected with the complexity of its structure, which you see now on the picture. Enel conventionally distinguished two kinds of rays: pi ray, which destroys tumor cells, vivifies, dries out the body, and destroys microorganisms. Omega ray, under the influence of which food does not spoil for a long time, and which has a beneficial effect on the human body. Subsequent research confirmed the presence of several types of radiation in the pyramid. Some of these types of radiation resonate with the frequencies of vibrations of healthy cells in living organisms. That is why the pyramid has a harmonizing effect on these organisms. In addition to radiation, weak static electricity is generated in the pyramid. It can be detected using a galvanometer. For this purpose, two electrodes connecting with the galvanometer were lowered into a jar of water. When the jar is outside the pyramid, no current is detected. But when it is in the pyramid, the galvanometer shows the presence of weak current. A researcher in the field of gravitational physics and free energy systems, Dan Davidson, also confirms that the pyramid is capable of accumulating an electrostatic charge. As evidence, he cites Brown's shocking experiment, the scheme of which is shown in the figure. In the pyramid with a side length of 30 feet, there are two spirals of single-wire stranded wire. The coils of the spiral are wound in opposite directions. When Brown attempted to connect the ends of the spirals, he received a severe electric shock. We have considered enough examples confirm the influence of the pyramid's shape on the material objects placed inside. Tali, are there any changes in the outer space around the pyramid?
Yes, Dusan. Of course there are. And this impact depends on the size, proportions, and materials of the pyramid from which it is made. For example, large pyramids, such as the Great Pyramid of Giza, form a column of ionized air on the continuation of their vertical symmetry axis, which spreads upwards to a height of several kilometers. The same process is observed with the pyramid designed by the engineer Alexander Golod. Although it is small, only 11 meters, this effect is achieved because of its proportions. This effect was detected using a radar. It was demonstrated much earlier by the famous German researcher William Siemens. Having climbed to the top of the Great Pyramid of Giza, he discovered that a bottle wrapped in a wet newspaper turned into a Leyden jar. In other words, an electric capacitor. After holding it over his head for a while, the electrical charge increased so much that sparks sprang from the bottle. Egyptian airlines are also well aware of these properties of the pyramids, which cause control systems to fail. And that is why all flights over the pyramids are forbidden. An interesting experiment confirming the presence of radiation from the top of the pyramid was conducted by a researcher. There was another pyramid located, which was upside down, with an angle of the top equals to 26 degrees, and with a basis of 360 millimeters, completely made of tin. And axes of the pyramids coincided, and the sides of the base were located parallel to each other. So when the pyramid was placed at the exact orientation along the sides of the world, anomalously high intensity of the magnetic field in the area of the top of the reverse pyramid was noted. This intensity exceeds intensity of the magnetic field of the Earth in hundreds of times. The author believes that this construction that he created concentrates the energy of some unknown type of radiation that's coming from the Earth and converts it into the energy of the magnetic field. And now, let me pass the floor to Dusan.
Thank you, Tali. Nina Sorokina, researcher and author of articles in the Life Journal, will tell us why the pyramid concentrates a certain kind of energy.
They even focused energy in a certain way. Not just one kind of energy, but a variety of kinds. They were designed and built so that they were strictly aligned to the north. That is, they were able to focus the energy of the Earth as well as certain cosmic energies. And this very angle, 51.83 degrees at the base, is the very angle that is formed by the secondary reflection of electromagnetic waves, such as light by a sphere or something of a spherical shape. And the Earth, being a spherical shape, in fact reflects and focuses certain cosmic rays at exactly this angle. So if you put a pyramid, it will act as a kind of lens on the surface of the Earth, which focuses these energies. Some people say that these are electromagnetic waves of a certain wavelength, of radio waves as well, so it resonates with them and it sends them out. Well, first of all, they are concentrated under the pyramid, and in some chambers too, since there were voids appearing. But the pyramid definitely had a top, and it was called the Benben stone. It was made of granite, though the pyramid itself was made of limestone, as a rule, because granite is a very expensive and rare material, whereas limestone and sandstone are much more common. And it is believed that its purpose, on the one hand, was exactly to focus the energies that go up through the pyramid, or on the other hand, maybe to discharge the extra charge. Because at the base of any pyramid, a rather strong charge is always concentrated. And by the way, despite the lack of a top, the pyramid still concentrates energy at that point above. But the fact is that on any even natural mountain, if it has a pointed shape, if you climb it, you will definitely feel the energy, because they all concentrate an electromagnetic charge there. Just because of their shape, this is the shape effect, or the radiation of the shape. Now, if you shape it properly, like a pyramid, if you align it from south to north, so that it is located along the magnetic lines, then naturally it will be able to focus lots of energy, including electromagnetic energy. If you remember, there was a man called Siemens, and there is brand Siemens in electrical appliances, so he actually...
Interesting information. Secondary reflection of electromagnetic waves from the Earth's surface also has an angle of 51.83 degrees, and there is a similar angle in the water molecule, so it gives the opportunity to enter into resonance interactions. Exactly this angle sets necessary proportions of the pyramid. Sergei Proskuryakov, a design engineer, and Alexander Golod, a research engineer, studied properties of the pyramids and came to a conclusion. A properly built pyramid in its zone of influence somehow corrects the structure of space, bringing it closer to a state of harmony. The dynamics of softening and liquidation of all negative manifestations essentially depends on the size of the pyramid, its alignment in space, and observance of all geometrical ratios. When the pyramid's height is doubled, its active influence increases by 5 to 7 orders of magnitude. Due to the angle of 51.83 degrees in the pyramid, there is a proportion called golden ratio. The same proportion is in the human body. Alexander Golod writes the following about such pyramids. The energy of pyramids is directly connected with the person, with our attention, with our thoughts, our idea of harmony. Those thoughts, those ideas which are in resonance with the golden ratio, with the pyramid shape, begin to dominate in the surrounding space. This is the basis of changing the program of our environment with the help of pyramids. In practice, it looks like this. If thoughts of a person who is in a pyramid influence zone, inside or outside, are filled with kindness, care about surrounding world, the probability of realization of implementation of these thoughts increases by thousands of times. If thoughts of the person in the zone of influence of the pyramid are filled with pride, evil, thoughts of destruction, cunning, then implementation of such thoughts will be repeatedly blocked. It is amazing how interconnected everything is. It turns out that when the pyramids were built, many factors had to be taken into account for them to perform such complex functions. So in ancient times there was knowledge to which we are only just approaching. Let us watch a video with Professor Konstantin Korotkov.
We understand that ancient people had very deep ideas about the influence of the form of their structures on the surrounding space. If we look at ancient structures, either pyramids or Parthenon or ancient Greek temples, we understand that they were built not just as some kind of cubes, so to speak, but they were built according to certain laws. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, or even in the 20th century, this all was already lost. Le Corbusier's ideas about building simple boxes had a devastating effect on civilization, while the right shapes, the shapes made according to the golden ratio, definitely affect all the surrounding space. We repeatedly took measurements in the vicinity of these structures. I have published work on research of pyramids in different parts of the world. These are the Mexican pyramids, and the pyramids in Belize, the pyramids in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also modern pyramids in Siberia. And it was clearly shown that these pyramids sharply changed the energy of the surrounding space. And accordingly, since they changed the energy, they also changed the state of person who is in the space. And it happens exactly near the pyramid. And it's clear that when the ancient civilizations were building these pyramids in all parts of the world, they knew about it and imagined it. So there's a big difference. If it's a pyramid, there is one kind of influence. If it's the Parthenon or the ancient Greek temple, there is a completely different kind of influence. If it's a Catholic or an Orthodox temple, there are completely different levels of influence. And, of course, these modern boxes that we have as housing, they certainly have influence. But I'm afraid it's negative.
Thank you very much, Konstantin Georgievich. Indeed, this is a very valuable insight about the influence of a shape. If a geometric object has the right shape, proper shape, and is made according to the golden ratio, then it has a positive effect on the surrounding space and the person, a human being. What conclusions can be drawn from what we have heard? Tali, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Dusan. You know, it's a shame that modern humanity is actually not paying attention to the knowledge of the influence of the shape in the organization of our living spaces. But everything is fixable, everything is in our hands, and people can change everything if they really want to. From the information that we just reviewed, it is definitely clear that the shape of the pyramid affects space both inside and outside of the pyramid. In order for the pyramid to work and reproduce the maximum effect, its sides must be oriented in the direction of the Earth's magnetic fields, magnetic poles. But what is interesting is that this factor of the pyramid's orientation does not apply to the pyramid device that is located in the coordination center of the international public movement ALLATRA, about which we will speak a little bit later. The material from which the pyramid is made also plays an important role. The following speakers will tell us more about it. And now, thank you for your attention. Let me pass the floor back to the speakers, back to the hosts. Thank you.
Спасибо, ребята. Пирамиды уникальны, и их
Thank you, guys. The pyramids are unique, and their capabilities are not fully explored. One thing is certain: these structures are very important for human civilizations, and as we understand, humans also play an important role in harmonization and ordering of various processes which occur on the Earth. And human beings themselves, as well as the pyramids, unfortunately are poorly studied. Ksenia, share please your information with us.
Greetings. Yes, Oleg. A human being is indeed a mysterious and not fully understood creature. Scientists have proved a long time ago that a human being is much more than just a body. In that case, why do most of us perceive only our physical body, while the biofield and aura remain unseen? Well, that's a very interesting question. Scientists who study quantum physics claim that our universe is multidimensional. What might our body and its energy structure look like in other dimensions? And how is it formed at all? Let's watch a video on this matter.
So I made this plastic thing. I'll explain now what it is. I'm so excited. What's wrong with my camera? Anyway, it's a 3D hologram, no less. So you open a 2D video on YouTube, and you get this. I'll try to align it now. I was actually doing it really fast. Here, I wasn't trying hard, I just thought I'd check whether it would work or not. Anyway, I'm shocked. Look, it's amazing. This is what it looks like. It turns out we are all in the Matrix. I've created a 3D space with my own hands from a 2D space. Can you imagine that? Shark. A shark, holy shit. That's crazy. Cool.
Our universe is a great hologram. What we have just watched is exactly the associative model of our physical body formation, which in fact looks like a hologram. However, observing from the third dimension, we perceive our body in the usual way that we are accustomed to perceive it. An essential point in this question: who perceives and how does one perceive? Have you ever noticed that we observe the whole world, including our own bodies, from the outside? This was illustrated associatively in the video where the guy watched from the side as the images holograms are born in the pyramidal structure. In fact, we are not a body. A person is a person, an observer who observes everything, including the body, from the outside. The flow of information passes through our consciousness, and at the output, as a personality, provides us with the informational reality in which we are accustomed. However, why is it so? Let's consider our world from a dimensional point of view. Now, there is a strong opinion that the higher we go up in the dimensions, the third dimension. And we're looking at it from the third dimension too. The three-dimensionality is when we add an axis of coordinates to the surface. And what is the fourth dimension? Three-dimensionality is completely distorted even from the position of the fourth dimension. It is no longer the three-dimensionality that we perceive, and no longer the density of matter that we see. Macro objects, such as tree or table, are perceived quite differently. A person is in the fourth dimension is a biofield. And in the fifth and the sixth dimensions, a person looks like a pyramidal structure.
Here, in the fifth dimension, all the more so, while in the sixth one, we are merely clouds. If we compare this way, we are sort of a spot, a voluminous and very complex one, but we have neither arms nor legs or anything else in the sixth dimension, yet we exist there. However, there's a clear manifestation of something that has a certain form, let's say, something like a holographic image, regardless of dimensions, and that can be called our hologram.
This is something much broader.
Much broader, yes, and it affects our energy structure, which entirely depends on what? On prana.
I see.
Prana is in the energy structure, but it's not a holographic one. I'll distinguish that way, excuse me, friends.
The holographic structure is something much larger.
Yes, you can call it whatever you want. Those are merely conventionalities that we ourselves, let's say, create, give names to, and make up, so to say, but that's a fact. This internal energy structure of ours, what we call biofield or whatever, fully affects our organic chemistry, that is, those cells which live, and so on. This is already a coarser manifestation of matter which, yes, depends on water. We need to drink water and so on. Why? Because a human won't be able to live on prana alone. But our structure, I mean the energy structure, yet in this case, I emphasize it once again. It's like a biofield, and not like the holographic structure itself, as it is called. So this energy structure depends on prana. But if we take it away, then our whole biological framework would fall apart. It won't be able to exist without it. However, our whole energy structure is enclosed in another structure, in a power structure. This is what we now call sort of a holographic manifestation.
Yes, right.
And here, a person with all his manifestations, let's say, biological and energy ones, he is enclosed in this structure.
Holographic.
Yes. And for every person, it looks like a pyramid. I mean, almost in any dimension. Is that interesting? It is.
Yes, it is very interesting.
Why? Because it's a power structure, and it can no longer be deformed. That's the point. But when a person develops spiritually, when personality becomes the light, the shape changes drastically, and it already assumes the shape of a cube.
An important component of our construction is the soul. It has nothing to do with this material world. When the personality merges with the soul, a new spiritual being is formed, and the power structure is transformed from the pyramidal to a cubic structure. What is the soul? The soul is a portal, or to put simply, a gateway to the spiritual world. As that portal, there is a continuous flow of light or energy, the force of Allah. It is precisely this power that enlivens not only our power, the energy structure, the hologram of the physical body, but also this entire material world. The flow of force of Allah is directed towards the person, and the person in turn, let's say, acts as a transmitter of the force of Allah into the energy of real. You can learn more about this in the programs with Igor Mikhailovich Danilov and in the Kaleidoscope of Facts issue, The Power of Attention. As it has been repeatedly mentioned today, a human being is a vastly more complex structure than it seems at first glance. For those who would like to understand this matter in more details, we recommend reading the book ALLATRA and the report Primordial ALLATRA Physics. I propose to watch the following video.
a scientific report, primordial ALLATRA physics,
field theory, electromagnetic and gravitational interactions, alternative energy sources, etc. It shows importance, scale, and timeliness of the latest knowledge in the field of fundamental and applied physics. It gives answers and relevant explanations for the main unsolved questions of contemporary physics.
We live in a unique time. Currently, we have access to knowledge which, when applied, we can change for the better, not only the material life, but also the spiritual life. What to do with this knowledge is our choice. Thank you for your attention. I pass the floor to the hosts.
Thank you, Ksenia. It was really interesting to see how a two-dimensional image forms a three-dimensional object. I'm still impressed by this example. It turns out that our body is just a hologram. It makes me wonder, what is the true reality and who am I? And in ancient times, properly designed pyramidal structures
Yes, indeed. This is a unique device that has no analogs in the world. Zakhar Kravchenko, a member of the ALLATRA International Public Movement, geodesist engineer, will tell us about the features of its design, its colossal capabilities, and the experiments already conducted.
Apart from huge structures, there are also unusual devices of smaller size, which when used can also produce unusual physical, spatial, temporal, mental, and other phenomena. Such devices include the well-known Nostradamus egg or Nostradamus time capsule, Kozyrev mirrors, and certainly the pyramid device. The scientific experimental pyramid device allows us to study the work of consciousness, reactions of our body. The device also contributes to human spiritual development in an indirect way. The pyramid device makes it possible to prove experimentally that human consciousness is outside the body. Thanks to this device, several scientific experiments have been conducted. An experiment affecting human psychic abilities, an experiment impacting human blood, an experiment of a human deflecting a laser beam, an experiment on influencing the future of a unified information field of the Earth, the properties and principles of which can be studied with the help of the pyramid device. An experiment on the possibility of remotely influencing the consciousness of people, experiment participants, by instilling in them a material consumer desire shifted in time. Thus, the researchers tried to find out whether humankind could face a new kind of intrusive advertising which a person will not be able to refuse. The pyramid device is a next-generation equipment, one of a kind in the world, that opens up colossal possibilities of studying the phenomena of human consciousness and of personality. You can watch all of these experiments on the ALLATRA TV channel. It should be noted that to date, the functional experimental capabilities of the pyramid device have not been fully explored. So, we kindly invite scientists, psychologists, psychics, doctors, and other specialists to study this device. After all of the above, you might wonder, how does it all happen? And what is this mechanism that makes such phenomenal results possible? It must be said that a human being is a very complex structure. In addition to the physical body, humans have an energy structure used in its making, the principle of operation, purpose, and so on. The device is pyramidal in shape. The ratio of its slant and base edges, inclination of lateral faces, dihedral angles, and other geometrical properties are also not accidental and are conditioned by the shape of the human power structure. You can learn more about human energy and power structure from the book ALLATRA and from the video Power and Energy with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov. The pyramid can be conventionally divided into two parts, the lower big truncated pyramid and the small pyramid, top, that together form the pyramid device. There are 11 faces of the device in total, 3 square horizontal faces and 8 lateral faces. The design of the pyramid's faces is two-layered. Viewed from a cross-section, this is 2 sheets of ordinary aluminum with a special polymer between them. We had to use conventional aluminum because Earth's metallurgical facilities do not yet possess the needed nanotechnological aluminum alloys, which would significantly improve the performance of the pyramid device. Each phase of the pyramid device has a flat coil, torus, through which a direct or altering electric current, as in household electricity, with a frequency of about 50 Hz can flow. The electrical current in the coil of each phase can be individually set within the range of 1 to 72 volts. This way, you can get a huge number of options for the device operation. Should anyone be interested, then using combinatorics formulas, it is possible to calculate the number of combinations for the aforementioned variables, namely 11 tori, 2 modules of current supply, and variations in the voltages in a separate coil within the range of 1 to 72 volts. Aluminum features the property of not being magnetized in electromagnetic fields, which is why it is used as a shield against the effects of electromagnetic fields. Due to this, the process of electromagnetic emission of the flat coil takes place exclusively inside the face of the pyramid. As the human power structure also consists of 11 faces, in order to work with it, it is important to be able to individually affect each face. The design of the faces of the pyramid device allows to localize the electromagnetic field exclusively in each face separately, so that when a certain facet is activated, there would be no excitation of the other faces. For proper and efficient work of the device, the surfaces must be tightly closed. In other words, it is necessary that the pyramid faces fit as closely as possible to each other, so that there are no slits or gaps. This condition is especially important for the door face of the pyramid. It is noteworthy that weak electromagnetic fields influence the power structure of a human. If the field is strong, the protection mechanism will be triggered and the structure will be blocked from influence. Therefore, the electromagnetic influence inside the pyramid is weaker than during a smartphone call. It is precisely the approaches in the construction of the pyramid device, such as the use and arrangement of special materials, correct geometric shape, and the usage of flat coils, that deliver tremendous superiority over the Kozyrev mirrors and the Nostradamus egg. Even in the idle mode, without supplying current to the flat coils in the faces, the pyramid device functions perfectly. One of the key properties of the materials used in the making of the pyramid device is the principle of forming a certain phantom viscosity. The materials that allow this are aluminum and copper. In order to explain the phenomenon of phantom viscosity, we will inevitably have to use the terms of the primordial ALLATRA physics. Its fundamental principles are laid out in the primordial ALLATRA physics report, which is publicly available on the Internet. For a better understanding of the phantom viscosity, let us first consider the pyramid device as a certain object with a set of geometrical and physical characteristics, and this object moves along with the planet Earth in outer space at a tremendous speed. According to the knowledge of the primordial ALLATRA physics, all space in the universe is not empty. This is not vacuum as such, but actually an ordered medium of high density, consisting of stationary particles, which form a motionless frame of the universe. Figuratively speaking, this can be represented as a crystal grid that spreads throughout the universe. Have you imagined this? Good. And now let's imagine the elements of the pyramid device as a huge number of molecules, which consist of different atoms, for example, atoms of metal and atoms of composite material. And these atoms have different elementary particles, such as protons, electrons, and neutrons. According to the same knowledge of the primordial ALLATRA physics, each such elementary particle would consist of a strictly defined number of phantom particles. As a result, we will see a huge swarm of particles of different density, different spatial orientation, with different spins of rotation, different charges, and so on. Some of them form composite materials of the faces, others form aluminum sheets of the faces, yet others form wires of the coils, and this cloud of phantom particles would form a pyramidal structure that we see on the screen as a beautiful backlit technological device. Have you imagined this? Good. Now let's do the simplest part. We need to imagine this cluster of phantom particles, the pyramid device, moving at tremendous speed through a conditionally motionless grid of stationary particles, and each elementary particle, as well as their group, will interact differently with the stationary grid of the universe, meaning with stationary particles, creating their different swirls, patterns, field structures, thus determining properties of those materials which they form. For instance, the composite material will have the usual properties of a dielectric. Aluminum sheets will have the usual and well-studied high electrical conductivity and non-magnetic properties, while copper wires in the coils will have their own physical characteristics. In order to associatively imagine and understand the essence of phantom viscosity, it is necessary to refer to the primordial ALLATRA physics and remember the property of stationary particles and the azoosmic grid. There is one stationary particle in one cell. If two phantom particles get into the cell simultaneously, then the stationary particle can collect energy and information from them. If more than two phantom particles get into cell simultaneously, the stationary particle will collect energy and information only from two phantom particles, while all the rest fly through without losing energy and information. In turn, this leads to disruption of the operation of the azoosmic grid itself. This disruption implies that the septon field of stationary particles is excited, and instead of absorbing energy, they on the contrary begin to give it back. That is, a dense field is formed. As a consequence, a local excitation is formed. In other words, the energy is released. The very same principle as in the work of an FFG fuel-free generator. In FFGs, the excitation of the septon field of stationary particles is achieved by rotational speed. In the case of metals, this energy release effect is achieved by the density of their crystal grid. So, when such a septon viscosity appears around, let's say, the pyramid device, Or let's recall the Nostradamus egg-shaped device. This field disturbs the flow of time and space for the one who is inside this device. The shape of the device also matters, but while the septon viscosity is beyond the quantum limit, then the pyramid shape affects the coarser atomic level, and this is already the realm of sound geometry. As you could see the effects the sound has on shape in the experiment with the Chladni figures. So let's make a conclusion. As we can see, all supernatural effects are explained by physical laws, which lie beyond the quantum limit. Humanity has yet to figure out this kind of physics, if we want to survive. After all, controlling the smallest particles of the universe, septons, opens the way to control all matter. This means it can help us cope with the climate crisis and reach a new level of development of our civilization.
I think our viewers, just like me, have a question after everything they have seen. Why such different informed devices as Nostradamus capsule, Hazarev mirrors, and pyramid device have similar functions: disclosure of physics abilities, psychic abilities, ability to look into the future and transmit certain information. So what is more important, the shape of a structure or the material
of phantom particles of Po? The stuff that makes up the entire visible material world. And such phenomena as free energy, time distortion, teleportation, telekinesis, and many others are the physics of the stationary Po particles, whose existence is stubbornly ignored, although they are constantly faced with manifestation of their work. So form affects the physics of phantom Po particles, and material affects the physics of stationary Po particles. And one more important point: in order for a material to excite its own septon field of stationary Po particles, it must possess two important parameters: the density of the crystal lattice and the plasticity of the material. If these conditions are met, there will be failures of stationary Po.
Calming it down. Oleg, do I understand it correctly?
Yes, absolutely right. The form affects the space, and the space affects the consciousness. But there are nuances. The egg shape affects objects that are inside, and the pyramidal shape affects objects both inside and outside.
How interesting, so many details.
Yes, and those who created such sacred structures knew about these nuances, and not just knew, but used this knowledge effectively. And what is interesting, ancient people in egg-shaped temples usually use the form effect for the primary experience of contact of the person with the effects mystery of sacred buildings, which will take place on February 13th, 2023. Everyone is welcome to view. It will be interesting. Thank you for your attention.
Dear viewers, our kaleidoscope of facts is coming to an end. We would like to express our deep gratitude to all the scientists and experts who shared their research with us, and also to the speakers, technical support team, writers, editors, translators and interpreters, designers, and all those who participated in the creation and organization of this episode of Kaleidoscope of Facts. All the best and see you soon.